These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code Tom. CB Distillery for sleeping. More info at CBDistillery.com, code Tom. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Home Title Lock, protecting your most valuable asset. More info at HomeTitleLock.com, code radio. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more information, teethhealth.com, code Tom.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Beyond the Valley by Ramesh Srinivasan. This is from Chapter 1, The Power of Data. In November 2017, my Apple MacBook Pro was stolen. It happened on the island of Ibiza, where I was visiting my friend, a documentary filmmaker. We were thinking of making a series of short films to illustrate innovative uses of new technology around the world. We sat together writing down examples of technological innovation, subversion, and creativity we'd already witnessed. We discussed themes I explore in this book, such as surveillance, the gig economy, and the future of work, artificial intelligence, and cryptocurrencies. After uploading our ideas to Google's cloud-based storage platform, Google Drive, we took a short break, locking our laptops in the trunk of our rented car. When we returned, both laptops were gone. Although upset, I was also relieved. I'd be able to recover most of my data because almost all of it was in the cloud. That was what I signed on to when I stored my files with Google as well as with Apple, Microsoft, and Dropbox. But in the bargain, I'd allowed them to profit from my data. It dawned on me, given the terms of service I'd agreed to, that the value of the data of my data to the storage companies was far greater than the value of my laptop to the thief. How many of us are fully aware that companies providing us with cloud storage have ways to monetize our data? They use targeted advertising, for instance, and charge fees once we get hooked on the security and peace of mind that their free services offer. We put faith in these companies to store our files securely, but our private information may no longer remain private if, let's say, the government asks to search through our data. It's also not private because all this data is surveilled, computed, and often manipulated in mysterious ways to influence and shape our behaviors as these corporations see fit. By creating accounts with these companies, we give them access to ourselves. So when we consent to privacy policies, in reality, we're signing on to systems of surveillance never before seen in human history, and we do so without being included or consulted. By desiring to keep our data accessible and recoverable, we lock ourselves into using their services. As I thought about getting my files back in Ibiza, I wondered, does access to my own property have to come with such strings attached? In my relationship to Apple, I find the strings impossible to untie. By purchasing an Apple laptop, I had unwittingly transformed from a customer into a part of the company's product line. I had provided Apple with private data and trusted Apple to protect it. Now, to retrieve that data, I had to purchase a new laptop with Apple-owned peripherals and devices. So I caught the next flight to Madrid. I then took the train to the city's Apple store located in Puerto del Sol. In many ways, this central plaza still serves in its centuries-old role as a landmark and gathering place for the entire Spanish nation, a point from which numerous roads emanate. With its distinctive aesthetic and its strategic placement in a civic space, the Apple Store stood out among the adjacent parliamentary and government buildings as if the global brand were more powerful than Spain itself. The day I was there, more people entered and left the Apple Store than passed through the doors of my neighboring building. In 2017, Apple, a private corporation worth more than $1 trillion, actually began to conceptualize its retail stores as town squares, thereby branding itself an integral part of our everyday lives. Other big technology corporations describe themselves in similar terms. Facebook CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, refers to the company as a social infrastructure for the global community. So what we have in the digital world are privately owned public spheres. They're branded as public, civic, and virtuous, but in reality are dominated by a single logic, extending profitability and economic value. How can these companies' interests be the same as the public interest? Like many other large corporations, Apple is shareholder-owned and therefore primarily accountable to its investors and executives, rather than to its employees, customers, or the general public. I had not begun to unpack the meaning of all this until I realized how monumental the Puerto del Sol Apple Store actually was, as an icon and a structure. As I walked into the store, an Apple employee invited me to purchase a new machine, log onto my iCloud account, and retrieve from Apple Cloud Storage the data that I lost from my stolen laptop. These transactions, completed in less than an hour, were simple and efficient. My data was extraterritorial, easily retrievable in Spain, and likely would be in most other countries. Purchasing a new laptop and getting my data back supported Apple's economic model. National borders were no threat or hindrance. The same was true with retrieving data I had stored on other corporate cloud servers managed by Google and Dropbox. In technology circles, this saying has made the rounds. If you're not the customer, then you're the product. Many of today's technologies come to us for free, but in return, our personal lives come for free to these technologies. But they are accessible for the company's profit and gain. Yes, when we search Google, we look for information, but do we realize that Google is also searching us? Users, and it goes on from there. So the book is Beyond the Valley by Ramesh Srinivasan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Just a heads up, tonight is, of course, the presidential debate. It's going to run an hour and a half, and the half hour after that, Free Speech TV, which carries our program and has an all-day lineup of progressive hosts. I'm preceded by Stephanie Miller, followed by Randy Rhodes, et cetera. You know, it's a David Pakman's. And Sonali. Sonali is from KPFK fame, and now on Free Speech TV is going to be moderating, or basically, there's going to be two of us who are her guests, and for the half hour after the debate on Free Speech TV, we will be having a conversation about, what we just saw in the debate, which means that I can't do my drinking game during the debate. But anyhow, in our program today, in our first hour, I want to get into this question of is using pepper spray to protect yourself against TrumpHumpers self-defense or assault? Seriously, it's becoming a legal question. And also, our super spreader president has blood on his hands. There's a new study out of Columbia University about this, and so does the Republican Party. In our second hour, there's just some fascinating stuff we're going to get into about how hospitalizations for things like heart attacks and strokes are down, and why, and how that could have something to do with the Green New Deal saving hundreds of thousands of American lives. And in our third hour today, I want to, revisit how you expect the vice presidential debates to play out. Although, obviously we can talk about any of these topics throughout any point in the day. But let me just start with this German guy. This is a story from Deutsche Welle, DW.com. It's the German broadcasting service. In fact, I used to listen to them on shortwave radio back when I was a little kid, when I was a ham radio operator, when I was 13 years old. And they broadcast, back then they were broadcasting in both English and German. I don't know now if I'm assuming that they still are. But this is a fascinating story here. This 71-year-old guy in the city of Aachen in Deutschland, in Germany, was going for his daily walk, and he had some pepper spray with him that he uses to protect himself from dogs and things like that. And a jogger without a mask, this guy, the 71-year-old man, was wearing his mask, and a jogger without a mask comes running towards him and, preparing to run right by him within, a foot of him. And so this guy pulls the pepper spray out of his pocket, and as the jogger's going by, whacks him with the pepper spray. And then a second jogger, same deal. He gets the second jogger too. He's like, both these people were within 2-3 feet of me. And then a pair of bicyclists actually come by. Same deal, no mask, riding by, and he zaps them. And at that point, the bicyclists stopped and called the police, called 911 and said, hey, this guy is spraying people with pepper spray, do something. So the police showed up, and, this German guy, the 71-year-old guy, he says, I'm 71 years old. If I get this disease, I'll probably die. And I've been very, very careful, and I'm wearing my mask, and these people are running around without masks, and they're breathing on me, and they're putting my life at risk. And I think if my life is at risk, I should be able to protect myself. If somebody gets within, he said 3 feet, the CDC and the World Health Organization recommendation is 6 feet. He says, if somebody gets within 3 feet of me, I'm going to spray them. So this is leading to it promises to be a fascinating court case in Germany because he's been charged with assault. And also he was causing dangerous bodily harm, which is the German version of what we would call assault, and interference with road traffic, because by spraying the joggers, they stopped, and I don't know if they caused not the joggers, the bicyclists. I don't know if they caused a traffic jam or not, but it's interesting. And so and I got to tell you, some stories around this. A couple of weeks ago, Louise and I there's this trail along the Columbia River that we walk on every day. Or whenever we can. Actually, there's a couple of different ones, and we try to change it up from time to time. But in any case, we're walking along this trail, and Louise was actually, and we're both wearing our face masks, and Louise was actually at that particular moment, she had her phone right in front of her, and she was FaceTiming with one of our kids and our grandson, and talking to them. And this guy is walking towards us without a mask, like he doesn't have a care in the world. And so we moved over, and the trail is maybe 4 feet wide, or maybe it's not quite that, maybe 3. It's like a standard sidewalk, whatever that is. About 3 feet? And so we moved over to the far edge of it, and he moves right to the middle. So he's just going to go shoulder to shoulder right by us. So we moved off the trail onto the it's kind of gravelly, on the edge of the river there. And he gets close, and he's heading towards us, right? And he doesn't stop. He kind of slows down, and he starts yelling at Louise, oddly enough. And maybe he thought because she was talking on the phone to our daughter that she was saying something to him, which was not the case. But in any case, he starts yelling, "You got to check out, those masks. The masks don't work. They don't. This is just all a hoax. And the masks, there's the whole mask thing came out of some high school social science study class, blah blah." And he's just, and you gotta check it on Google. You'll find this and And he's like walking, he's like getting closer and closer to us as he's like talking loudly without a mask. And I'm thinking, I should have brought some damn pepper spray. And now, we find, people going into supermarkets and things. The new TrumpHumper thing that these TrumpHumpers do is they try to cough on you. They think this is cool. Oh yeah, I'm gonna own the libs here. Like it's liberal to try to save, to prevent yourself from getting sick, or even more consequentially, prevent yourself from getting infected, even if you never show symptoms, but then you pass it along to a dozen other people and eventually somebody dies. And now Trump is doing these super spreader events. I mean, and the reporters, I don't know if you've seen this footage. There's a half a dozen of them or so from the last couple of Trump events that have gone viral on Twitter, where these little video clips of reporters who are, just standing there trying to do their job, and TrumpHumpers are coming up on them. These maggots are coming right up on them with no mask, yelling at them, saying, "Oh, fake media, fake news, you're traitors," all this kind of stuff. And the reporters are like, I'm just here doing my job with my mask on. Should reporters carry pepper spray? Unfortunately, tonight at the debate, there will be those sneeze guards, the plastic barriers between Trump and Joe Biden. So it wouldn't do Joe Biden any good to take some pepper spray with him. Not that they would let him, and not that I would suggest that. But, is it assault or is it self-defense? And, for our lawyers out there, how would you build a case in either case? This German guy, this 71-year-old German guy, he is going to take this to court, and he's going to claim self-defense. And the German prosecutors and the jogger that he sprayed are saying, no, this was assault. I think it's fascinating. On the other side of the break, I want to share with you this amazing new study out of Columbia University, and we'll pick up your calls on this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
On this and other topics, as they say. There's a lot of the news today that we'll be getting to in the 3 hours of our program. We're going to have a short guest at the bottom of the hour, too. Former Biden advisor. And welcome back. Paul in Lucerne, California. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Well, your pepper spray. You don't want to pepper spray somebody. You can cause blindness. So what you want to do is you want to use bear spray. Bear spray will not cause blindness. It's made with a totally different chemical. And it's way more effective. Yeah. And
I thought they were the same thing.
No, they're not. And one more quick thing, okay? If you're going to, in California, if someone coughs on you, you could actually call the police and have them arrested for assault. And if they have coronavirus, they'll be charged with assault with a deadly weapon. So,
well, if that's the case, you should be able to defend yourself with mace or bear spray or whatever.
You can. You can. When someone's coughing on you in California, spray them in the mouth with bear spray. We've done it. I've done it.
You've done it?
And you should see. Yeah, some dude was coughing on me at the store, and I said, "Step back," and he stepped closer. I said, "Okay," right to the face, right in his open yelling mouth.
Whoa!
And he called
and what
the police
happened?
on me, and he called the police on me, and the police said, "No, you used proportionate response. You are considered to be deadly. You're breathing on him. He gave you plenty of warning, and he sprayed you with a warning shot. If you weren't within distance of him, you wouldn't have been sprayed."
So he called the police, and the police actually showed up at this store where you were when this guy was blowing his air at you?
Yes.
And what, was it a single police officer or a bunch of them or what?
No, it was a Clear Lake police officer, and he showed up, and he told the guy that since the guy was breathing on me, that we could both press charges on each other, basically.
Wow.
It would have been a walk.
So you sprayed him with you used your bear spray?
Yeah, I used my bear spray. Yeah, and the reason why is because bear spray does not blind you. It will. You can spray a whole can in your face. And my friend rode his bike and we live in a rural area, and he crashed his bike, and the whole can blew up into his face. So we called poison control, and then we called bear spray company, and they said you can have the whole, because you can't have blind bears in the woods.
Right.
But pepper spray can blind you if you get sprayed enough of it in your face.
Sure. So yeah, it burns the cornea. So the bear spray, is that like mace? Is it like, I remember back in the 60s when they were tear gassing us at Michigan State University, they rolled out this new kind of gas. It was called CN or CS, I forget which. They had these two different kinds. And it was more of a nerve gas. It was kind of upgraded tear gas. And I think that's what they're using these days when they call it tear gas. Is that the kind of stuff that's in the bear spray, Paul?
That's exactly what it is. No, bear spray is made with different chemicals. There's just none of it's different types of peppers, but they put a chemical in there so it won't burn you. It burns you, but it won't chemically. I don't know exactly how it works. I'm not a chemist.
Yeah, so it feels like crap, but it's not going to injure you. I guess would be the way to say it. Is bear spray a brand name, or are you speaking about a generic product?
No, any bear spray will do this. They can't call it.
So there is a category of these things called bear sprays.
Yes, and you want to use them because they're way more effective. Because for one, they spray out a stream, and you can get them.
Right. Amazing. Okay, Paul. Thank you. Thanks for that story. That's amazing. I have to share that with our commercial listeners when we hit the other side of the break. Paul, thank you very much. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, we have a new video up over at TomHartmann.com for folks who support our program. It's about a growing movement, oddly enough, on the hard right, on the far fringe extreme right, that says that because Congress, after the Civil War, had not seated senators and members of the House from the former Confederate states and refused to until they changed their state constitutions to eliminate slavery, because they did not have a say in the writing and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that ended slavery, gave equal protection under the law to everybody, and guaranteed the right to vote to formerly enslaved people, that because the Confederate States were not represented, these are illegitimate amendments. And oddly, one of the people who's at the forefront of this is Amy Coney Barrett. It's all over at TomHartmann.com. So, just a moment. During the break, Paul from Lucerne, who's a regular caller into the program, called in and said that he carries bear spray with him. He said, first of all, pepper spray can blind people. It can damage the cornea, but bear spray, there's this brand or this type of spray. I'm not real familiar with these. I've never been a consumer of these products. But this thing he calls bear spray, he says it doesn't cause damage to the eyes. It just makes you feel insanely uncomfortable or in pain or whatever. And it squirts rather than sprays because, it's designed to get a bear. And he was in a supermarket and a guy started yelling at him and he sprayed the guy in the face. And the guy called the police and the police showed up and they said to the guy, you could be charged with assault for potentially infecting him with a disease, and he could be charged with assault for spraying you in the face with bear spray. So do you guys both want to go to jail or not? And at that point, they kind of said, okay, see you later, and went their separate ways. But it's like, okay, amazing. Oh, so I'll get to your calls on that in just a few minutes. But there's this other story that is just mind-boggling that I wanted to share with you. There's a new study out of Columbia University, and it is explicitly laying the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans, arguably over 100,000 Americans, at the feet of the Republican Party and Donald Trump. They compared the United States to a bunch of other countries, developed countries, and pointed out how we lack in the United States. Unlike every other, it's just like there's 34 nations in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. That's like the 34 richest countries in the world. And the poorest of them is Costa Rica. Right? So that's a pretty good spread, right? It's from all the fancy schmancy countries, who have trillion-dollar budgets, all the way down to Costa Rica. These 34 developed countries in the world. Out of those 34 developed countries in the world, only one doesn't have a national health care system. That's the United States. Only one. And so anyhow, they compared us to 9 other OECD countries. And what they found, this is an actual quote from the study. Quote, if the U.S. had followed Canadian policies and protocols, there would have been only 85,000 U.S. deaths, making more than 132,500 American deaths avoidable. If the U.S. response had mirrored that of Germany, they write in this report from Columbia University, the U.S. may have had only 38,000 deaths, leaving 179,000 avoidable deaths. If we had responded to the coronavirus the same way Germany did, and all these European countries are seeing an uptick right now because winter is coming and they opened their schools. Boston is going, whoa, opening the schools is a big mistake. Of course, Charles Koch and his friends, and I don't know if he's personally involved in this, but his philosophy lives on, right, in FreedomWorks. And FreedomWorks has this army, hundreds of thousands of people who signed up back during the Tea Party days and are still getting their daily newsletters or their several times a week newsletters. I get them. And they've built this army of people who can text messages. If I said tweet earlier, I meant text. Who can text messages, not just to their neighbors and friends, but to school board, and they'll push out to you, okay, text, open the schools to these 5 school board members. And they'll think that there's a wave of voter sentiment, and they'll go along with it. When actually it's some cranky right-wing billionaires who want their businesses open again, and they have enough money to make it happen. So here we have 179,000 people dead who didn't need to die, according to this study. And why is that? Well, I would say it's because we haven't had a real president for 4 years. We've had a reality TV show run by a reality TV host. Donald Trump, loves jumping in front of cameras and microphones and crowds, has his whole entire life. Michael Cohen said, he used to just sit in his office and read People magazine for hours. He doesn't like running things. He doesn't like the hard work of business. He spent almost obviously has no interest in running our country. He spent almost a third of all of his time in office at Trump golf courses where the Secret Service and the entourage show up and millions of dollars get funneled into Donald Trump's pocket. He spends as much as a half a day every day watching Fox News and other right-wing networks and tweeting and retweeting bizarre conspiracy theories. Even now, in this time of crisis, he's not being a president. Instead, he's trying to build and solidify an audience and customer base for future businesses like selling merchandise, subscriptions to a newsletter or a website, a new television show, maybe even a TV network he's been talking about. Trump has just moved on to his next money-making scheme. This is why he's acting like he doesn't care if he wins or loses the election, because he doesn't at this point. He knows he's going to lose this election. And what he's doing is he's lining up the suckers, the rubes. This is how he always does it. He moves from one thing to another. He totally fails and screws up one thing and then moves on to another. Steaks, vodka, airlines, casinos, board games, clothing, you name it. He's tried it and failed and then moved on, using borrowed money in most cases. So here we go. Anyhow, I'll pick up your phone calls after the break. Stick around. We'll be right back. It's the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back here on your media support group for We the People. Oh, we do have a quick guest on the other side of this break, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the 2 murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War. The other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American black shirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow black shirts charged out brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell.
On the Science Revolution this week, there is more news from the Republican death cult. We need to start calling things what they are. The Republican Party is a death cult. Brian Felton drops by on why dangerous forever chemicals are still allowed in America's drinking water. Professor Richard Wolff will be talking about how and why capitalism failed to protect us from COVID-19. And in Geeky Science, Trump makes the case for Medicare for all. Tune in for the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is a former senior advisor to Vice President Joe Biden, the former director of Latino Affairs and the director of administration in the office of the vice president under both Clinton and Obama, Mo Vila. The website, joebiden.com, Twitter @Joe Biden. Mo, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your last name. Tell me, correct me if I am. Welcome to the program. What do you see playing out right now?
Oh, hey, well, Tom, first of all, thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be with you. Thanks for what you do for our progressive community around the nation. Look, I think this is, first of all, I never thought tomorrow's my 59th birthday, and I never dreamed that on my journey of life I would ever see what we're seeing today with the dismantling of our democracy, with the hatred and the vile behavior on the Republican side, and nobody, really, no Republican being patriotic enough in the Senate or in Congress to stand up to this tyrant. So, you know what, Tom? I'm stupefied, to be honest with you. I never thought I'd see it.
Yeah, it is pretty extraordinary. Tell me about Amy Coney Barrett. What impact? First of all, you were the director of Latino Affairs in the office of Vice President Biden, if I have that correct.
That is correct.
What impact would her presence on the court have? I mean, in one particular case, she ruled that somebody using the N-word does not produce a hostile workplace. Right?
Listen,
white.
Yeah, this is such a very delicate topic, in my opinion, because I am one of the few Democrats you probably have on your show who recognizes that, regrettably, unfortunately, everything that's wrong with it, it's a foregone conclusion that she's going to be, the next Supreme Court justice. So
I think that's obvious now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I go through this inner conflict because a lot of Democrats are, like, we got to stop it. We got to. The reality is the chances of stopping her nomination are slim to none. So there's a part of me that, frankly, says we just need to face the reality that she's, wrongly so, right? She's going to end up being on the court. So your question is, how does that impact? Well, listen, I also was senior advisor to Vice President Biden and Gore on LGBTQ issues. So both on the Latino front and the LGBTQ front, Amy Coney Barrett is extremely, extremely dangerous to my two communities. Frankly, she's dangerous to most Americans and our basic civil rights. On the gay side, we've got to worry about gay marriage. On the gender side, we've got to worry about a woman's right to choose. On the Latino side, when she doesn't think calling somebody the N-word is a hostile work environment, something's wrong with you, Tom. Something is fundamentally wrong with you as a human being when you think that that's not hostile. And so the bottom line is, to answer your question, she's dangerous.
Yeah. So, this is a big concern. I think that, Joe Biden this morning saying we need to do something to fix all this. I mean, he pointed out that courts of appeals can have as many. One has 19 members. That's not abnormal. Yeah. In fact, that's how our courts have evolved. It's time for the Supreme Court to evolve as well. Mo, last question. It's our question of the day for our listeners. This guy in Germany has been arrested for pepper spraying a jogger who ran by him within a foot and a half of him refusing to wear a mask. And the guy was wearing a mask. He's a 71-year-old. And so, our question, is it appropriate to use bear spray if somebody gets in your face and starts, yelling Trump stuff at you without a mask?
I predict that we will end up with, if the longer this pandemic continues to survive and just haunt us all in our daily lives, I actually do believe that there will come a time where it will be okay to use bear spray on somebody who refuses to wear a mask, when it's within 6 feet of you. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I, as an openly gay man growing up in the AIDS pandemic, it eventually became criminal, if you will recall, and it still is in many jurisdictions, to knowingly engage in behavior that could pass on the HIV virus. And I actually believe we're going to end up there with this virus as well. It's lethal. And if you know that you have it, or you know that you could have it, and you put somebody else at jeopardy, I don't see how that is not criminally liable.
Yeah, I'm tending to completely agreeing with that point of view. Mo Vila, former senior advisor to Vice President Biden, JoeBiden.com, the website, IWillVote.com, of course, also be sure to check that out. Mo, thanks a lot for dropping by. It's great talking with you.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me, and I want to remind your listeners, vote, please vote. Thank you, Tom.
There you go. Amen. Thank you, Mo. Great talking with you. Fascinating times we live in, right? Alejandro in Miami. Hey, Alejandro, what's up?
Hello, Tom. I just wanted to, discuss the whole tort debate you were mentioning about whether someone is committing a battery. Whether you have the right of self-defense to use bear mace, and I just want to point out how tricky that is. Very, very legal. Legal scenario. It just reminds me of my tort class. I'm a lawyer, went to law school and stuff. So, for us, what a battery means, this is like under general negligence law, like tort law, is a common law. A battery is the tort of intentionally and voluntarily bringing about an unconsented, harmful, or offensive contact with a person or to something closely associated with them, such as a bag or purse. So I definitely see at first glance when you said that story about the German, jogger, I would have said, no, he has no right to use bear mace because you just can't bear mace people indiscriminately just because you're afraid of them getting too close to you. If you just happen to walk by, and there's a potential slippery slope there of, well, I can just spray everybody who gets too close to me.
Well, there is actually right now in Germany a law. I mean, they're enforcing it in different ways around the country, but social distancing, keeping 6 feet away from people is the law in many parts of Germany. I don't know if it is in this particular town of Aachen, but, but back to you, Alejandro.
No. Well, I mean, definitely. Well, definitely don't claim to be a German civil law expert. I only speak about U.S. common law.
Me neither.
Right. No, it's just important. I mean, maybe if that's the case, and that would change the argument over there. But definitely in the U.S., I'm just going off generalities, of course, and then it can go to specific scenarios. Generally, right? Okay. This is what we do in law school. Go for hypotheticals. And so certain instances, maybe bear mace can be used as self-defense. I just think in the first scenario, if you're just walking by and if someone gets too close to you, I don't think you can bear mace them because I think that would be a battery onto them, right? Even though, of course, no one should get within 6 feet of you because of the coronavirus pandemic going around. However, what that person said earlier about the HIV pandemic, I think is very applicable here. When the HIV/AIDS was, there's laws against people, purposely transmitting AIDS or engaging in conduct that would transmit AIDS or HIV. The same can be said for coronavirus. You could definitely criminalize that. If you have, if you're positive, how Trump was, and you go to rallies or you go to close contact with people knowing that you have a deadly disease that could kill someone, I definitely think that's a battery because obviously that you're engaging in harmful conduct. I mean, and there's definitely physical contact there because it goes
to get very serious about this, Alejandro, back in the 80s, and this is, Mo is speaking to this as an openly gay man. Back in the 80s, there were a number of states, mostly Republican-controlled states, that, and in fact, this was something that the Republicans actually ran on in the elections of '84 and '86. There were states that passed laws specifically criminalizing basically gay sex, because if you they didn't know what caused AIDS back then, and there was this thing about, oh well, maybe if you have sex with if a gay man has sex with another person, then he could be spreading HIV. So they were trying to criminalize gay sex or gay behavior, not just sex, kissing and everything else, based on HIV specifically. Some states named HIV because somewhere in the middle of there, they figured out that it was this one particular virus, or maybe it was toward the end of that. But other states didn't name the virus. They simply said, if you knowingly, spread a communicable and deadly disease to another person, you're guilty of a felony. And therefore, in those states, I think that that law could be applied to somebody like the person who got up in Louise's face here, a week or so ago and started yelling at her to go on YouTube and check out the conspiracy videos that would prove to her that masks are a hoax, right? I mean, this guy was dead serious about this, and he was getting close.
Yeah, no, and I think in those scenarios where somebody gets too close, whether they know it or not, but they should know better because there's a pandemic going around. So I would say there's a duty for other people not to infect others. You don't have and I think this reminds me of what a judge in West Palm Beach said about regarding mask mandates and some plaintiffs were challenging that. And I think the judge was very correct in his decision. He said you don't have a right to infect others, and I think that's very important to understand, especially with those supposed freedom-loving people. Oh, wearing a mask is muzzle or whatever. That's nonsense. That's nonsense under the law. The state has the police powers to enforce health mandates. There's nothing unconstitutional about that. It's not depriving your freedom. Coronavirus doesn't care about your freedom. So I think it's definitely important to.
Yeah. Fascinating. Alejandro, thank you. It's great talking to a lawyer about this. It's fascinating stuff. Should somebody, if they use mace or bear spray or pepper spray or whatever to enforce their social distancing around them, should they be charged with a crime? Or should they get a medal? We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 45 minutes past the hour. Back with your call. And welcome back. Brent in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hey, Brent, what's on your mind today?
Hello.
Brent?
Can you hear me?
On the air.
Okay.
I certainly can.
I see no difference between warning somebody and spraying them with bear spray than those inane laws in Florida where they can just, because they felt threatened, they can shoot people. And
you're right. This is stand your ground.
That's what I'm trying to say. I couldn't think of it. Thank you. It's the same as stand your ground. So I think the spraying is totally legit. Either that or just stand your ground and shoot them, Which would
well, in Florida, apparently you can get away with that, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever threat that George Zimmer thought Trayvon Martin represented to him, having somebody breathe a deadly virus on you has to trump that. It has to be a bigger threat.
Exactly. One other thing you brought up earlier with the way the Nazis fomented and poisoned public opinion, and drew that association with Charles Koch. And his texters. If Trump foreskin loses, could we see a decline in Reaganomics, televangelism, and corp pirate avarice? And I will leave the airways for that.
Yeah, no, it's fine, Brent. I think that if Donald Trump there's an interesting kind of backwards thing here. And I'll give you a simple example to set up my answer to your question. When Bill Clinton won the presidency in 1992, Rush Limbaugh had been on the air for 4 or 5 years at that point, but his show was still a fringe show. It had a relatively small audience. He'd done a very good job of promoting it. He had hired a PR firm and he'd gotten his name out there a lot, but not a lot of people listened to Rush Limbaugh. But then when Bill Clinton became president and Limbaugh's show went to becoming like the voice of the opposition, that's what built his show. His show exploded during that time. Similarly, in 2004, late 2003, actually, when Shelley and Anita Drobny put together Air America Radio, the progressive radio network, it was the Bush presidency that really propelled Air America into popularity. People want to hear the voice of the opposition. So I'm guessing that counterintuitively, kind of the opposite of what you're suggesting, Brent, is that if Joe Biden wins this election, what you're going to see is actually a rise in right-wing media because they're going to be representing themselves as the opposition. And, the more progressive media we'll still be here and still be doing the job and still be talking to our audience every day. But I think that broadly speaking, the televangelists, the right-wing, the corporations that have a right-wing bent to what they do and what they're all about, I think they're actually going to be empowered by a Biden presidency. I think you're going to see, keep in mind, the Tea Party. This came about because America elected its first black president. This was, Koch and his buddies, throwing out basically angry old white people at President Obama. So that's what I think is going to happen. I don't think things are going to get better at all. I think things will get better for most Americans. But in terms of the media landscape, I'm not holding my breath. We'll be right back. You can help America return to democracy by telling friends and family how to listen to this and other great progressive programs. Tag you're it.
Hey, we have a new video up for the supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com. I really enjoy doing these separate from what we're doing on the air because sometimes I can say things that would be impolitic or inappropriate to say on the air. Like the name of the website that I'm talking about in this video, and I lay it out and share it with you on the video. It's ratbleepingthecourts.com, and the bleeping, of course, is a word that you just can't say on the air that starts with F. And this website is just outing these judges that Donald Trump and the Federalist Society have been sending through Mitch McConnell's Senate like a friggin' assembly line, and how unqualified they are, how hateful they are, how aggressively they've worked to screw students, to deny. Well, one of them actually said that women who are on birth control pills, that should be reason to fire people. Right? I mean, it's just insane. You can check it out over at ThomHartmann.com.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. Genevieve in Edinburgh, Texas. Hey, Genevieve, what's on your mind?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Mr. Tom. I was on your show 3 months ago. You told me to call back. I was the one with coronavirus. I work in a nursing home, and you told me to call back after a few months to see how things are going and stuff.
So give us the update.
It's kind of sad here. I work in Houston area, so in Texas, actually. I used to work in East Texas, but I'm working in Houston, Texas area now. It's sad. People don't care. In the building that I'm going to be working in, 130 people got infected out of 140. And the building that I used to work in, where we had the outbreak in July, out of the 60 people, 40 people got it, not including the staff. And then we had 12 patients that died, over time, and it's just sad. I walk around and I go to, outside and stuff, and people here in Texas, they don't care. They don't care about the elderly, and it's for me. I lived in the Northeast for 5 years, and I'm an immigrant. I came from the Philippines, and our society is different. We care about other people, because We just care about our elderly, but I find that the Texans they don't care. They just don't care.
I think they're reflecting Trump. I think Trump is leading this charge, and then you get these sycophants like, Greg Abbott, your governor there in Texas, who just, do whatever Trump tells them to do. But Greg Abbott himself has got to be scared to death of getting this. He's in his 60s, as I recall, and he's in a wheelchair on top of that. So, which may or may not present a problem, depending on how easy it is for him to breathe. And, there's just a bunch of things. But he's starting out with a pre-existing condition, shall we say. So that's a tough one. Genevieve, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Have you heard about anybody getting maced or bear sprayed in Texas because they got too close to somebody? Or have you ever wanted to do that?
People don't actually care. Fortunately, in Walmart and the grocery stores, people wear masks. At least it's required. But in restaurants, we're going to be opening to 75% capacity, and the bars are starting to open. You wear a mask to get in, but when you're inside, you don't wear a mask. So you can't bear spray people because no one is following social distancing.
You can't do that inside.
Masking.
Yeah. This would be more for public spaces. Genevieve, thanks for the report, and thanks for checking back in with us. I appreciate that. John in Chicago. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Tom, I'm talking about the threading email coming to people because email came from Saudi Arabia. And last time and now the Saudi Arabia.
How do you know that, John?
Yeah, because the Richard Madden show, I see the guy came and he told he know the email came and Saudi Arabia.
No, the reporting from Ratcliffe, from the former right-wing Tea Party cokehead, as in Charles Cokehead, Congressman Ratcliffe is now the National Security Director. It took him 2 tries because he lied on his resume the first time around. He said that it came out of Iran and it was designed to hurt Trump. I think, emails saying you better vote for Trump or I'm going to beat you up are not designed to hurt Trump.
Right. This is a lie because last time Saudi Arabia gave $3 million to Israel help Trump, online help. And Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, and Israel right now trying to help Trump to win again.
Well, I think they're also trying to work out peace in the region. John, I see Netanyahu overtly trying to help Trump, but I don't know about the other guys. Linda in Des Plaines, Illinois. Hey, Linda, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to let you know I work at UPS in the largest facility in the Midwest, Ketch, outside of Chicago. And in my work area, there's over 25 people. There's only 4 of us who wear masks continuously. When COVID first started, the supervisor stated to me, we don't need to clean everything, when I insisted that I wanted to wipe my desk. We have 1,000 employees coming and going per shift. I can count when I'm exiting from my desk to the parking lot. It usually takes me about 8 minutes a walk. At the minimal, over 25 people not wearing masks. You try to avoid people, you try to dodge people. They don't want to take it seriously. I've been told if you don't feel safe by management and fellow employees to just stay home. I have gone to the district manager.
Linda, forgive the interruption. Is this United Parcel Service or U.S. Postal Service? You said
United
I didn't hear if you said
Parcel
UPS
Service.
or USPS.
United Parcel Service.
Amazing. So are you going to start carrying bear spray?
Keep your packages quarantined. Do not bring them into the house.
Yeah, there you go. Linda, thank you very much. That's a cautionary note. We'll be right back and continuing our conversation on this. And also I want to get into the Green New Deal and how it can save thousands of lives.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code Tom. CB Distillery for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Home Title Lock, protecting your most valuable asset. More info at hometitlelock.com, code radio. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more information, teethhealth.com, code Tom.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Business by Christopher Leonard. This is from the prologue. It's titled The Hidden King. Nobody ever visits the stranded little community of Waldron, Arkansas. But even if they did, a tourist would never see the place for what it really is. Most outsiders would be fooled into thinking it was an actual small town. On any given morning, the residents awaken and begin their routine along Main Street. Old men park their pickup trucks by the curb in front of the Rock Cafe, which opens early for breakfast. As the cafe's booths and tables fill up, a congregation of old-timers in cowboy hats gathers in a loose ring of aluminum chairs out front, smoking and talking and stubbing out their cigarette butts in a bucket full of sand. Later in the morning, Chambers Bank in the south end of town opens up, and the tellers cheerfully greet customers by name. On Thursday at noon, the livestock auction opens in a cavernous barn on the north side of town, drawing crowds of ranchers who haul steel trailers behind their trucks, with cows staring out between the horizontal slats. In the late afternoon, teenagers park their cars by the gazebo south of the auction barn, proudly displaying their Mustangs and Broncos like big game trophies. These events have a rhythm of their own, the clockwork functioning of a small-town economy. But it's all just window dressing. All of it would cease to exist in a moment and have no impact whatsoever on the true Waldron or its true economic reason for being. The real tempo of the town's economic pulse is measured by the coming and going of semi-trucks that roll down Main Street at periodic intervals, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the middle of the night, tanker trucks full of animal feed rumble past the empty stores and out onto country roads that lead into the hilly terrain that surrounds town. At dawn, other trucks trundle in from the hills, heaped high with battered metal crates full of chickens that exude clouds of white feathers along the highway. The tempo can be measured in the regular arrival of train cars full of grain and oil seeds that dump their loads at a feed mill that clanks and hums and churns all night. And in the parade of refrigerated trucks that pull up to a slaughterhouse near the feed mill and get loaded with pallets of frozen meat. This is the real functioning of Waldron, Arkansas, and its true reason for being. This is the heartbeat of Tyson Foods, the nation's biggest meat company. The Tyson plant on the north end of Waldron is the only thing that keeps the town on the map. Appropriately, many residents simply refer to it as the complex. That's because the Tyson plant isn't just a factory, it's more like an entire small-town economy consolidated into one property. The complex contains its own feed mill and hatchery, its own trucking line and slaughterhouse that covers several acres of land and processes about 1 million dead chickens a week. The complex is like an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses, an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses that used to define a small town like Waldron, the kinds of businesses that were once the economic pillars of rural America. Of course, tourists to Waldron would never see the Tyson plant, and not just because it sits on the north fringe of town away from Main Street. Visitors are stopped at its front gate and forbidden from exploring its grounds. So a tourist would have to be content to stroll along the sidewalks downtown, observing the fake Main Street, the deceptive array of little businesses that make it seem like a community. This illusory appearance cloaks Tyson's existence all the way from its roots in rural America to the grocery store shelves and restaurant menus where its products finally reach American consumers. The average shopper is usually fooled when he or she peruses the meat aisle, seeing what appears to be an abundance of choices and products. Tyson brand name wouldn't necessarily stand out with its logo gracing just a handful of products. But the rotisserie chicken slowly turning in its oven, the Bonisi brand pepperoni, the Lady Astor brand chicken cordon bleu, the frozen chicken pot pie, and the Wright brand bacon all come from the same company, Tyson. And then there is all the unlabeled meat that Tyson floods into the U.S. food system every day. The meat served in cafeterias, nursing homes, fast food restaurants, and suburban eateries where more and more Americans eat their meals. There's a very good chance any of the meat purchased in these places was made by Tyson. Even if Tyson did not produce a given piece of meat, the consumer is really only picking between different versions of the same commodified beef, chicken, and pork that is produced throughout a system that Tyson pioneered. Tyson's few competitors have resorted to imitating the company's business model just to survive. This book aims to explore the vast hidden territory between the remote farms and towns like Waldron, where Tyson raises millions of animals, and the final point of contact where consumers buy the company's meat. Unseen between these two poles is a hidden power structure that has quietly reshaped U.S. rural economies while gaining unprecedented control over the nation's meat supply. Just a handful of companies produce nearly all the meat consumed in the United States, and Tyson is the king among them. The company sits atop a powerful oligarchy of corporations that determines how animals are raised, how much farmers get paid, and how meat is processed, all while reaping massive profits and remaining almost entirely opaque to the consumer. Because Tyson and its imitators are based in the geographic and economic fringes of America in forgotten places like Waldron, the company has managed to escape the scrutiny it deserves. While Tyson's operations are remote, the company's business practices affect virtually everyone. About 95% of Americans eat chicken, which means they almost certainly eat chicken produced by Tyson. And then it goes on from there. The book is The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Industry by Christopher Leonard.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back, Thom Hartmann here with you. We will continue our conversation about when is it appropriate to bear spray somebody who's getting in your face without a mask. Or is it? Or is it illegal or whatever? But I wanted to talk about science for a minute. We have known for decades that air pollution, particularly the kind of air pollution that comes out of automobile tailpipes and coal-fired and oil-fired power plants, and to a smaller extent natural gas. But they say natural gas is cleaner, and the reason why is because it doesn't produce as much particulate matter. We have known for a long, long time that these tiny particles of basically soot and it's hydrocarbon stuff. It's diesel stuff and gasoline fumes. That these things cause strokes and cancer and heart disease. I mean, we have known this since probably the 50s, maybe before that. In all probability, the epidemiology was becoming apparent. I mean, this goes back to the Industrial Revolution in the mid and late 19th century, 1800s. So we've known for some time that air pollution kills people. We just never really had any kind of way of measuring it based on let's observe a population kind of thing outside of the studies that, I remember a number of these came out in the 1980s and 90s that got a lot of attention, that showed that people who lived near freeways were more likely to have heart attacks and strokes, generally speaking. It was a very small percentage of increase, but it was there. It was measurable. And the children, and particularly low-income children who lived near freeways, particularly in urban areas where those freeways were heavily congested, were more likely to have high levels of lead in their bloodstream. Now, this was all, like I said, this was the 80s and the 90s, and lead was easy to measure. And there were these, increased and measurable levels of lead in the bloodstreams of children who lived near heavily trafficked areas where there's lots and lots of car exhaust, which just makes sense. Well, bring this now to 2020, to right now. There is a remarkable op-ed that was published in the New York Times on the 20th, 2 days ago, of October. It's titled, "Where Have All the Hospital Patients Gone?" And it's by Pauline Chen, MD. And she writes about how she noticed that the hospitals just, starting in March, just basically kind of emptied out. And part of that was because people were afraid to go to the hospital, right? I mean, would you go to the hospital when TV is showing pictures of refrigerated trucks backing up to the back door of the hospital to put bodies in them because the morgue has overflowed? I'd be kind of reluctant to go to the hospital. And so the assumption that these doctors made about where the other patients went, and I'm talking emergency room stuff here, broadly speaking. She's a surgeon. She practices in Boston. But, what happened to the strokes and the heart attacks? People, if somebody's having a heart attack or if somebody's having a stroke, these are not things, events in our lives where not going to the hospital because you're afraid of the coronavirus is an option. Now, there may have been a slight increase in deaths from strokes and heart attacks from people in the early months of the epidemic, in April and May, and particularly in the regions that were hard hit, in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, where, some people thought they could ride it out and they ended up dying at home. And, we see that, the signature of that in some of these numbers. But broadly speaking, across the country, there's, right up till today, I mean, by June or July, pretty much most hospitals had figured out how to deal with COVID. They were segregating COVID patients. And most Americans had figured out, that it was safe to go back into the hospital. And people are going back, for dermatological procedures or to see their rheumatologist or to get their, PSA tested or for their annual physical or whatever. People are going back to the doctor now. But they're not showing up in hospitals with strokes and heart attacks at the rate that they were prior to COVID. Why is this? Well, it turns out that, there's a couple of variables. Nobody's really certain about this. One of the confounding variables that Dr. Chen points to is that some research shows that during recessions and periods of lower employment, a higher unemployment, people may at least temporarily stop drinking as much and smoking, and they may get more exercise and change their diet and lose weight, all of which reduce your risk of stroke or heart attack. But these tend to be temporary behaviors, and they tend to be kind of event specific. But the larger one, she says, the most likely explanation for why there are fewer hospitalized people is that there are fewer people having heart attacks and strokes. And then she points out that the statewide stay-at-home orders aimed at curbing the coronavirus resulted in a dramatic drop in human activity and a concomitant improvement in our air quality all across the country. Poor air quality is linked not only to respiratory diseases like asthma and emphysema, but also to strokes and heart attacks. Which brings us to a second study that was just published by Saul Griffith. He's a physicist. He got one of these MacArthur Genius Grants, where they give you $250,000 a year to just do whatever you're doing. And he asked the question, in fact, he started this organization called Rewiring America. And he asked the question, what if Americans could drive the same number of miles and still blast your AC to cool your single-family suburban home all summer long, but cut U.S. emissions by 40%. And use existing technology without a single new invention. And so he just looked into this. What happened if we started driving electric cars and producing electricity, not using fossil fuels, not using oil or coal or natural gas, but instead using windmills and solar panels in ways that actually could work right now using existing technology. Nothing new has to be invented. Obviously we'd have to build some new ways of generating power. This is happening all over the country. Right now, solar and wind are actually cheaper than any other form of electric generation, except occasionally natural gas. And even natural gas in most places is more expensive than solar or wind. Depends, of course, on how much sun you have and how much wind you have. And what he found was, or what this study found, was that first of all, greening America, converting our power grid to renewable sources, and converting the entire American auto fleet over to electric vehicles, which typically takes a little more than a decade for all the old cars to flush out of the system and be replaced by new cars, would create 25 million good jobs and would eliminate roughly 75% of the nation's total emissions, fossil fuel emissions, within 15 years. And because this is talking about existing technology. Now, that technology is going through, leaps and bounds of improvement on a constant basis. Adam Zarofsky, who was the New York State's climate engineering and energy portfolio management, he's the guy who was managing the investments for the state of New York. He's now part of this group, and he says there's this notion hanging in the air that there are sacrifices needed to be made. No, he says this is actually a way for us to stimulate the economy, put people back to work, put money in people's pockets. It's actually suburban households that do the best. If we applied this to business, we could slash our carbon footprint by 65%. And maybe we could get a permanent drop in hospitalizations for heart attacks and strokes. Keep in mind, heart disease is the #1 killer in America.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Heart disease #1, cancer #2, COVID right now is #3. Interesting stuff. And welcome back. Let's see here. Santos in Empire, Oregon, or is it Santos? You're on the air.
Good morning. I was calling about the guy that called in earlier about the pepper spray. He really needs to be fact-checked. I'm a retired police officer, and the difference between the stuff that we carried and the bear spray was a lot more concentrated. And that concentration was in what was called Schofield units. And the stuff we carried was
those are the heat index, right?
That was the heat index, yeah. We carried about 2 million. And if I'm not mistaken, it would take, one drop of that would take roughly 2 million drops of water to dilute it, to make it appear that there's nothing there.
Right.
Okay. On charging people for using that, there is a provision in the law under harassment that if you create a violent response in another, you can be charged with harassment.
So the guy who got in Louise's face, if she had bear sprayed him, he could be charged with harassment and what? She could be charged with assault? I mean, in Florida, I mentioned this earlier, George Zimmer said that he felt threatened by Trayvon Martin because Trayvon Martin had Skittles and a can of iced tea in his hand. And George Martin didn't know if those were, George Zimmerman, didn't know if those were weapons or not. And so he felt justified in killing Trayvon Martin, and the courts upheld him, said he was standing his ground. Wouldn't it be much more frightening if Trayvon Martin had been coughing a deadly virus on George Zimmerman? I mean, couldn't the stand your ground laws be used? Or are they exclusive to guns?
Florida has weird laws. But
well, there's
way to
20 states now that have
harassment-
that same stand your ground provision.
Yeah. Okay. But if another way to look at harassment is you smack a lady on the butt and she turns around and smacks you in the face, she can have you arrested for harassment. And it's the same thing. And it's worded by words or actions. So the same way with assault. If you put someone in fear of physical danger, that's an assault. So your wife could have had the guy charged with assault for screaming and hollering at her. If he put her in fear of being injured.
Right. Yeah, and getting COVID is definitely an injury. It's interesting. Santos, I'm guessing that the law is going to catch up with this, that we're going to probably start seeing regulations emerging that clarify these things. But I don't know of any anywhere in the country. Do you?
No. I retired in 2000, so I'm not sure what.
Okay. Well, it's a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for the call and for illuminating the issue. I appreciate it. And bringing your expertise to our conversation. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So back in 2016, the election year, Donald Trump was not yet president. He was just running a scam university, Trump University. That year, and Barack Obama was president, that year, Corinthian Colleges and ITT Technical Institute, two scam for-profit colleges, went out of business and ended up leaving thousands, maybe tens of thousands of students just basically screwed. No degree, no job, and massive amounts of student debt. So President Obama and the Secretary of Education put together this plan. It's called the Borrower Defense Rule, that said that if somebody got ripped off by one of these for-profit colleges, they didn't have to pay back the debt. If it was student debt that was issued by the federal government, we would just eat it as a country. They were the victims of fraud. Well, it turns out Betsy DeVos had other ideas. She came into office, of course, just months afterwards, as Donald Trump was sworn into office, and she's been fighting it all the way. You can check the whole thing out over at TomHartmann.com and our new video for supporters of our program. Welcome back. So we also have the debate tonight, and as I mentioned at the opening of the show, I am not going to be, the last debate. I think I told the story the day after that somewhere back, maybe a month or two ago, I realized that I was having a glass of wine with dinner every night, and then it was becoming, a glass of wine with dinner, and then another glass of wine before I went to bed, and I wasn't sleeping well, and I wasn't feeling good when I woke up in the morning, and I just had to stop. It was like part of the COVID whatever, and so I pretty much quit drinking, for like a month or so, and not some AA thing or anything like that. I just, this is not good. I need to get control of this. And so I just quit drinking. And when Trump started interrupting Biden in the last debate, I went out in the kitchen. I said, I'm sorry, I've got to open a bottle of wine. And I drank half that bottle that night. I mean, that was a tough debate. But tonight I can't because Sonali and I are doing this thing on Free Speech TV right after the debate at 8:30. For those of you watching us on Free Speech TV, it should be a lot of fun. And Free Speech TV will also be carrying the debate. And it'll also be, carried on SiriusXM and probably many of our affiliates. So one of the things that is no doubt going to come up tonight during the debate, Trump has already said he's not going to answer the questions that are asked, or he hasn't said this. Somebody on one of his debate prep people kind of leaked this, that Trump's strategy tonight is not going to be to interrupt Biden. He was advised to do that according to Michael Cohen. He was advised to do that in the first debate, apparently by Chris Christie and the guys who were doing debate, Mark Meadows, the guys who were doing debate prep with him, because Joe Biden is a stutterer. And if you could throw him off balance, he might start stuttering, and that would give you that moment that you could turn into a commercial about, making fun of his disability in a way that would make him seem like he was, less than a fully human being or something like that. This is how people trash people with disabilities. They minimize them. I don't expect that tonight. I'm guessing Trump will, make some grunts and groans and probably interrupt some, but I think that he's always looking for his reality show edge, right? And part of this, keep in mind, again, I am quite confident, based on his behavior, that he's no longer even seriously running for president. The things that he's doing are not the things that you would do if you wanted to become elected president of the United States. And in fact, the more he does them, the lower he goes in the polls. He knows this. This man is not stupid. I know that, it's fashionable in progressive circles to say, oh, look at that video of Trump and look at how funny he walks and, he must have a neurological disorder. I tweeted about this yesterday. I don't think he has a neurological disorder. I think he walks funny because he's got 1.5-inch lifts in the heels of his shoes. He's wearing a girdle and he's wearing Depends. According to Noah Castor, who worked with him for years on the Apprentice shows, he was wearing Depends back then. So he's got a diaper on and he's got a girdle on to hold in his belly. And, that makes you uncomfortable. And so, surprise, surprise, he's leaning forward. The lifts are pushing him forward. But anyway, I don't think that the guy is stupid. I don't think he's disordered outside of the obvious stuff, being a sociopathic narcissist, who delights in seeing people die. I get all that. But I don't think he's incompetent or stupid. So my guess is if tonight is his audition for his TV show, Mark Burnett TV show on NBC after the election, or for his own show on Fox, or for the show that he'll put on One America News Network if he buys that network, there's been talk about that, or if he starts his own network like Glenn Beck did. It's not that hard to do in the era of computers. NBC is rolling out Peacock this week, right? It's a TV network, an outgrowth of NBC, but it's entirely online. So why wouldn't Trump do the same? So anyhow, I think what he's going to bring up tonight is he's going to try to go into Hunter Biden constantly. And I doubt that Joe will push back by pointing out that Trump's daughter Ivanka, on 2 different occasions, got trademarks from China and Japan literally the same week that Donald Trump was visiting China and Japan, as if these were not bribes. Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Government Crew has laid this out. In fact, they've instituted a couple of lawsuits about this, that Ivanka is just insanely corrupt. And then Jared is a slumlord, and he and Ivanka were pushing this massive tax break for slumlords. It's called opportunity zones, where basically if you have low-income housing, suddenly you're getting a huge tax cut. And they pushed that through. They got that, and they made millions of it. It's corrupt.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So do you think that Biden will bring up Ivanka's corruption? I'm guessing he's not. I'm guessing he's just going to say children are off limits here, or something like that.
For our book club today, we're reading Out of the Wreckage, A New Politics for an Age of Crisis by George Monbiot. This is from Chapter 3, Don't Look Back. The political history of the second half of the 20th century could be summarized as the conflict between its two great narratives, neoliberalism and social democracy. Social democracy in this era, whose story I briefly summarized in Chapter 1, acquired much of its power and coherence from the thinking of one remarkable man. Across 4 decades, John Maynard Keynes's work dominated economic thought and practice. During the period the French called the Trente Glorieuses, 1945 to 1975, his prescriptions are widely credited with reviving economies and distributing their benefits. That they remain more or less the only mainstream alternative to neoliberalism today reveals a remarkable stagnation of both thought and ambition. The first and most obvious problem with an attempt to use Keynesian social democracy as a core political narrative is that the story is more than 80 years old. Political stories need to be renewed. If politics does not feel fresh, it struggles to kindle the imaginative excitement from which hope arises. The second problem is that the surviving enthusiasm for Keynes among mainstream parties is highly selective. It has been reduced in most cases to lowering interest rates when economies are sluggish and engaging in tepid counter-cyclical public spending, which means injecting public money into the economy when unemployment is high or recession threatens. Other Keynesian measures, such as raising taxes when an economy grows quickly to dampen the boom-bust cycle, the fixed exchange rate system, capital controls, and a self-balancing global banking system, an international clearing union, all of which Keynes saw as essential complements to these policies, have been discarded and forgotten. Not only does this ensure that the rich old story has been reduced to 2 thin chapters, whose loss of context destroys their narrative power, but the absence of other Keynesian measures, as well as changed global circumstances, weakens the effectiveness of the remaining elements of policy. Let me give you an example. In 2009, in the hope of boosting the economy in the wake of the financial crash, the British government spent £300 million on stimulating sales of new cars. Under its scrappage scheme, if car owners traded in their old vehicles for new ones, the government, with the help of manufacturers, knocked £2,000 off the price. This lavish program was partly justified as an environmental measure, though it was clear from the outset that it would lead to a rise in environmental impacts as the materials and energies used in manufacturing new cars outweigh any likely savings from better fuel economy. Its primary purpose was to boost British car assembly plants and protect the jobs of their workers. But European state aid rules forbade such schemes from discriminating between cars made in Britain and cars made abroad. British car parts assembled only some 15% of the vehicles sold in that country, which meant that 85% of the benefit went to car plants in Germany, Japan, and other manufacturing nations. We could see this spending as foreign aid to some of the world's richest nations. The current pattern of globalization, which developed partly as a result of abandoning the fixed exchange rates and capital controls that Keynes advocated, ensures that this problem is to some extent repeated wherever Keynesian stimulus spending is applied. It might lead to a general, if scarcely detectable, global economic uplift, but the domestic impact will necessarily be weaker than Keynes intended. This issue is compounded by the phenomena of job-free growth, caused in part by the automation now spreading into almost every economic sector. Today, governments pull the starter cord, spending public money and cutting interest rates, that ignited the economy and employment in the past, only to discover that it snaps before the motor fires. 2 feeble measures, removed from the rich framework of thought and narrative in which they were once embedded, have little chance of sustaining a political revival. Another issue is that the troubles that beset the Keynesian model in the 1970s have not disappeared. While the oil embargo of '73 was the immediate trigger for the lethal combination of high inflation and high unemployment, called stagflation back then, that Keynesian policies were almost powerless to counteract. Problems with the system had been mounting for years. Falling productivity and rising costs push inflation, wages and prices pursuing each other upwards, were already beginning to erode support for Keynesian economics. Most importantly, perhaps, the program had buckled in response to the political demands of capital. Strong financial regulations and controls on the movement of money began to weaken in the 1950s as governments started to liberalize financial markets. Richard Nixon's decision in '71 to suspend the convertibility of dollars into gold destroyed the system of fixed exchange rates on which much of the success of Keynes's policies depended. The capital controls introduced to prevent financiers and speculators from sucking money out of balanced Keynesian economies collapsed. Today, it's hard to find a mainstream politician in Europe or the Anglophone nations, including those who call themselves Keynesians, prepared to call for their reintroduction. We cannot hope that the strategies deployed by global finance that helped to destroy the efficacy of Keynes's measures in the 70s will be unlearned. If the soft Keynesianism proposed by opponents of neoliberalism is to amount to anything but tinkering, it has to confront a wider set of challenges than most of its advocates have yet been prepared to acknowledge. But perhaps the biggest problem residual Keynesianism confronts in the 21st century is that when it does work, it collides headfirst with the environmental crisis. The book, Out of the Wreckage by George Monbiot.
The hidden history of the war on voting tells how the GOP has been stealing elections for decades and will again this year unless we stop them. So what makes Trump supporters Trump supporters? Good question, right? Well, Psychology Today did a deep dive into a whole bunch of literature on this and a number of studies and concluded that there were 5 characteristics that crossed right across virtually all Trump supporters. I do a deep dive on these on our video over at TomHartmann.com for the supporters of our program today. But here's essentially what it says. Number 1, they are authoritarians, by and large authoritarian followers. They want a strong father figure to make them feel safe. Number 2, social dominance orientation. They believe in a caste system and they think they should be in the top caste. Number 3, prejudice. They view people of other races poorly. Number 4, intergroup contact. Most of them have never experienced significant contact with people of another race or people, deeply different than them. And number 5, relative deprivation. They feel like they've been screwed. They're not sure why. And Trump tells them, oh, it's those brown people. It's all over at TomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Corky in Rochester. Hey, Corky, what's up?
Oh, Tom, yeah, it's me. How you been?
Good. Good. Nice to hear from you, Corky. It's been a while. What's up? What's on your mind?
Yeah, I wanted to give Joe some advice if he's listening. Don't go after the girls because they're going to paint you as a bully. Go after the bullies. That's what really upsets him. Go after the emoluments clauses and the girlfriend's getting free reign of the White House, like that Guilfoyle. She runs around there like she owns the place.
Yeah. And she's being paid $180,000 a year.
Yeah. I think you're a little bit off on the that one topic you were talking about.
On the bear spray?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, I think because I forgot. I'm 69 years old. I lose my train of thought.
That's okay, Corky. Call us back when you get it. It's all good. Corky, thank you. And I'm guessing you said, oh, shoot. John in Apple Valley, California. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Okay, first of all, hi, Tom. It's good to talk to you again. It's been a while. I wrote a brief on assault and battery back in early July. I just looked at my computer, July 4th, and I called you about it. And Congressman Pocan spoke about it for a minute. I honestly forget what he said, but I want to expand upon that just a little bit. If you're in a commercial establishment, you can file a civil lawsuit for conspiracy against the business. That's one point. The next point is the business licenses. You can pressure.
You mean if they're not enforcing mask rules?
That's correct. The other thing about mask
now
rules,
this would be state specific, right? It would like in California there is a mask rule. In Montana there isn't, so you couldn't do that in Montana.
It would depend upon if there's an assault and battery, a civil assault and battery law in that state. Okay. Now the next thing is you can go after the business license, and the way you do that, you should go after the mayors and the local politicians, and you tell them that if you tell them to do that. You pressure them to tell the businesses, we're going to take your license away if you don't enforce the mask rule. That's two. Now, the next thing is personally. What you can do personally is just like when you're in an airplane, you need to keep your mucous membranes moist. I use Vicks. because that will capture the virus when it comes in, and it won't get deep into your lungs. It'll cut out a lot of the virus that you get, a lot of the viral load, and it's viral load.
John,
specific.
you're a lawyer. Let's not be giving medical advice here.
I'm also I got through law school as a medical technologist. I spent 20-25 years in the clinical laboratory.
No, I get it, but John, I just have to stop you there. I'm real committed on this program, and it's not just me. I mean, some of the stations and affiliates, that carry our program and whatnot. Everybody's concerned about false information getting out there, or quack cures or weird conspiracy stuff. And so, we just, one of the things that one of the conversations that I won't have on this program is, what's the natural way to prevent COVID or something like that. Until the National Institutes of Health says it, it's not happening on this show. So let's talk about assault and battery, and unless you've said everything you have to say on that regard.
Well, I looked at it civilly and going after the business. I did not look at it criminally, which you were talking about today. So I have not given that thought. I have not given that much thought.
So what would your legal recourse be if you lived in a state that has a stand your ground law, and somebody is without a mask walking too close to you, or even worse, talking or yelling at you from less than 6 feet without a mask? Can you stand your ground with bear spray?
Honestly, Tom, my personal opinion is you avoid them. I don't know about standing ground law. We don't. Yeah, I would do that. I would just turn around and walk away. I see people in the grocery store and in the hardware store without masks, and I just give them a good bit of distance. That's all I can do. I mean, I'm not going to take these guys on. I'm 73, and most of the people that do this, are young, healthy guys. I'm not going to deal with that.
Right.
I'm just too old.
Right, which is why they're feeling indestructible. Yeah, I got it. Okay, John, thank you. It's nice to hear from lawyers. Jim in Denver. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Tom. Hey, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the case that occurred here a couple weeks ago. A security guard hired by the local TV station to go out with them and try to keep them safe during the protests and demonstrations shot and killed someone who sprayed him with pepper spray.
Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. And that guy was, it turned out he wasn't even a licensed security guard. He was just some guy with a gun, back to you.
He wasn't just to counter that, he wasn't just a guy. He was indeed hired by Pinkerton, which is a big security corporation in this country. Mm-hmm. It just turns out he didn't have a license, and evidently most of these people that work for Pinkerton don't actually have a license. So that's some other tangent. I don't want to go down that path. Regarding the pepper spray, so it's, if you look at the images of it, it looks like a Wild West shootout, right? One guy has his pepper spray, the other guy has his gun. So the gentleman that's charged with the crime, the security guard, he pleaded not guilty. And his attorney has said he's going to plead self-defense. And so this goes, I think, hand in hand with what you're saying. This could be a case here that starts setting the tone or maybe clarifying more, what you actually can and cannot do with a pepper spray and or bear spray. So I think this will be a case here to kind of keep an eye on over the next 6 months and see if that...
is that a Colorado case, Jim?
Yeah, that is. That was in Denver about 2 weeks ago. And I said, I know that he just went into court Monday and pleaded not guilty, and they're going to try the self-defense thing, which I think they potentially have issues. I'm really surprised he got charged with second-degree murder, frankly. That seems a little, I think that might get reduced as what probably will happen and come out of this. There'll be a plea deal or something, who knows. But,
had he already been sprayed, or was it just a threat?
It was simultaneous, Tom. They were having an argument. The guy pulled out his pepper spray, and so I guess you could say he was getting before the shot, because there's a still image out there that the pepper spray, and they're both still standing, and then he shoots a matter of a split second later. So that was just a little bit of a nugget there for you. And by the way, I did that. There is definitely distinct differences between pepper spray. I'm a backpacker, so I know a little bit. And bear spray. Bear spray is more of a widely dispersed, less potent thing. In the wild, you want to spray it it sprays a big cloud, whereas pepper spray is indeed for close encounters where you can spray somebody right in the face against a human being.
Okay. So pick your poison here.
Exactly.
Interesting. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Thanks. Gary in Riverside, California. Hey, Gary, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, how are you?
Good.
I'd just like to say, as far as for the person coming up into your face and spewing out all kind of negativity about the mask, I believe that we have the right to wear a mask, and they have a right not to. But when they start to infringe on my right of, to wear the mask, I think that's wrong. I think they should respect other people's space, I guess.
Well, just to be clear, Gary, I'm not concerned about this guy yelling at Louise about how the masks they don't work. It came out of a high school science project. It's nonsense. All this kind of stuff. I'm not so concerned about what he was saying, but the fact that he was trying to get within 2 or 3 feet of her to say it. She managed to largely avoid that, and she and I just kept on walking and just picked up our speed. But he was coming at her. And, at that point, it's not his words, it's his virus that I'm concerned about.
Exactly.
Because he didn't have a mask.
That's my feeling, too. I'm not defending him. I'm defending your wife and you. He had no right to get that close to you. That's a problem in our country. I think we have to learn to respect other people. And there's a lack of respect right now, especially in the environment that we're in right now. Respect other
Well, and that's
people's
what's
rights.
being modeled for us by the president.
Right, exactly. And he's putting it out there, and the people they're grabbing it and they're running with it, and it's wrong.
Yeah,
very wrong.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate.
Okay.
It's in fact, Gary, thank you for the call. In fact, Sam Elliott just voiced a new ad for the Lincoln Project that I strongly recommend you check out, and it's titled Men, and it's about being a role model to your kids. And, it's an implicit swipe at Donald Trump. It's just brilliant. It's just brilliant. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit TomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Tim in Los Angeles. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I had a run-in at I'm in East Hollywood, L.A., and I had a run-in with a homeless guy yesterday at the corner AM/PM Mini Mart. I was running in to grab some yogurt, and the guy was in front of me, and he stood there with no mask and nothing, no gloves, nothing, and held the door for me. And I motioned him away and said, hey, that's okay. I'll just wait till you get in, and he went off totally. And, he was
went off. What do you mean?
And yelling. He was screaming and yelling and accusing me of coming up on him suddenly and all this, right? And, of course, everybody in the store knows me, so they all backed me. But he was within, he may have had COVID. I don't know. He was within 3 feet of me and 3 feet of about 6 other people. Luckily, the whole thing would be on camera, except for, how do you sue a homeless guy if I end up with COVID? Also, I realized that, the people who actually need mental health care the most can't afford it and will never get it. So, there's that element. I'm going to go get my green ribbon. I've been seeing the kids on free speech pushing that green ribbon for mental health. I think that's, in the end, the only thing I can think to do is, to call my councilman and see if they can't do something about protecting and reining in the homeless. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, Reagan, well, back in the 80s, Reagan closed the mental, or the 70s actually, he did it in California, closed the mental hospitals, and then, as president, extended that nationwide, and suddenly we had an explosion of homelessness. Now today, a large portion of the homeless population is not mentally ill. They are people who are the victims of neoliberalism. They're the victims of 40 years of Reaganomics, of trickle-down economics, of the destruction of labor unions, wiping out the middle class. In 2010, the Republican Party succeeded in driving the percentage of Americans who are middle class below 50% for the first time since the 1950s. And so we've got a homeless population that is, that has, there are different dimensions to it. And one piece of that homeless population are these mentally ill people you're talking about, Tim. And I agree, we need to be doing something about that, about the mental health problems that we have in our communities. We've got, a fellow like that who's a homeless guy who lives a block or two from our house, and he stands on the street and screams at people driving by, and, he's got his grocery cart there and everything, and it's like, every time I see him, I'm thinking that, this guy really needs a home. He needs somebody, looking after him, somebody taking care of him. I realize he's a paranoid schizophrenic, but, that doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve dignity, and he doesn't deserve respect, and he doesn't deserve a place to live. And Reagan took all that away.
I had about a schizophrenia at one time, and I'll tell you, it is hell.
Yeah, I can imagine. Tim, thank you very much for the call. Thank you. It's great to hear from you. We'll be back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast, 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at ThomHartmann.com. So we've got a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com for the folks who support our program, and it's about exactly why rich people, I'm talking about people who make more than $1 million a year marginally, and over $3 million a year, that group totally, why this group of people who are multi-millionaires and are literally bringing into the house over $1 million a year and over $3 million a year, why would they want to destroy Obamacare? Turns out there's a very simple answer, and a very straightforward answer, and a rather shocking answer, that they would put all this time and effort, years of work, into trying to kill Obamacare and throw 20, 30, 40,000 people, million people, off their health care. And you can see it, hear it, read all about it, as it were, over at ThomHartmann.com in our new members-only video. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Eamon in Kissimmee, Florida. Hey, Eamon, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom. Good afternoon. I just wanted to go back to the point that you raised earlier about in reference to tonight's debate, if Mr. Trump would mention or bring up the Hunter Biden and the allegation about his corruption in Ukraine. And basically the point I wanted to make is as you also pointed out and touched base about the corruption with Mr. Trump's kids. One of the things that one of the corruption item that took place, the first foreign trip, if you recall, of Mr. Trump to Saudi Arabia.
To Saudi Arabia?
Yes. Ivanka Trump received $10 million grant from the Saudi kingdom. And that was one
Really?
of the...
What for?
That was just a grant. That was just to as a.
And they just said, "Here, Ivanka, have $10 million. Your dad's coming to visit us."
Yeah, just for making the trip, and as a point of being hospitality, being hospitable, and show of appreciation. It was public. It was discussed, and it was basically being analyzed along with other issues at the time in 2017. Also, when she, as you mentioned in the program just a while ago, that they had trademarks, exclusive trademarks from the Chinese government. They also had set up a conference with entrepreneurs and business people from China, and they basically offered them a green card or permanent residence if they would invest in Ivanka and Jared Kushner's company. That was also
that's right. I remember when that happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
But that was Jared's sales pitch, wasn't it? Or that? I mean, that wasn't Ivanka or Jared. It was somebody connected to them, wasn't it?
Correct. That's the company, and actually, it was Jared's sister as well. Jared's sister was involved.
That's right. It was Jared's sister who was making that pitch in China. Yeah,
Jared and that's correct. And their company and the some of the executives of their company were making the presentation. And they said that if they cannot do that, that has to go through the process of the immigration. And they actually, I guess,
they were selling green cards, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, if you recall that they were trying to blackmail the Qatari government. Out of the blues, Mr. Trump held a press conference, and he was making an allegation about the Qatari government being involved in terrorist acts. And the reason is because they refused or declined to be blackmailed and bail them out with that building on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan,
666 Fifth Avenue, Jared's building. He was his $1 billion mortgage was coming due, and he was begging for money from Qatar. Qatar wouldn't give him the money, and so Saudi Arabia blockaded Qatar.
They submitted when they blackmailed them and they coerced them into the actually there was pictures of the foreign minister or equivalent to the Secretary of State coming out of the tower from the building, and unfortunately they're just a small country being also blockaded by Saudis and the United Emirates, which obviously this was also orchestrated with the peace treaty, just basically which they don't share the border with Israel. This was all basically scripted just to help Mr. Trump with the election.
Some pretty giant scams going on here.
Exactly.
We've got a White House filled with professional grifters. Don Jr. is a professional grifter. Eric is a professional grifter. Ivanka is a professional grifter. Melania, a professional grifter, and Donald Trump, obviously the king of grifters.
That's very true.
Eamon, thank you. Thanks for reminding me of a lot of things that I forgot about. I appreciate it. It's great to hear from you. George in Highland Park, Illinois. Hey, George, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to comment the hairspray can harm the cornea, and that you might get retribution for that. Please don't do that. Also, on the homeless issue, they're making private institutions. I don't know if you know that, and that scares I don't know if you can say hell out of me, but...
Yeah, you can say hell, yeah.
And that's it.
So what you're saying is that I get it. Number one, you're risking damaging somebody else's health if you spray them with. You said hairspray. I was saying bear spray, but same stuff. Well, actually, it's very different stuff. But it's the pepper spray.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
I was talking about. Yeah, no, it's good. But you're saying that these private mental hospitals are trying to fill in the space that Reagan created?
I don't know, and it scares the living daylights out of me.
Yeah, I can. It's a privatized space. I can see it happening. I can see it coming. George, thank you for the call, and thanks for listening to WCPT. Donald has a plan to win the women. Honest to God, he's got a plan to win white, middle-class suburban women. I will share that with you after the break, and ask you if you think it's going to work, and how you think that and other things might play out in tonight's debate. What are you expecting? What will your drinking game be?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at Gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code Tom. CB Distillery for sleeping. More info at CBDistillery.com, code Tom. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Home Title Lock, protecting your most valuable asset. More info at HomeTitleLock.com, code radio. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more information, teethhealth.com, code Tom.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Edward Nell's new book, Progress and Poverty in Economics. The subtitle, Henry George and How Growth in Real Estate Contributes to Inequality and Financial Instability. This is from the introduction, which is subheaded, Reviving the Work of America's Most Original Economist. Andrew Mazzone and I collaborated on a project to review the work of the 19th century American economist Henry George, especially his landmark book, Progress and Poverty, 1879, to see how George's work stood up in the light of modern economics and to determine what could be brought up to date and applied to the contemporary world. We wanted to establish that George's work was relevant and also to criticize American economists for having overlooked or rejected George both in his own time, when his work was a worldwide sensation, and afterward, even today. Andrew died suddenly in the middle of the project. This book is a tribute to him and completes what we began. George began his career as an author and public personality with Progress and Poverty, arguing that progress brought poverty in its wake and that poverty might even outpace progress, an important original point of view that has not lost any of its relevance since George's time. In fact, in our age of burgeoning inequality, it may be more relevant today than ever before. The grounds for this paradoxical interlinking of progress and poverty lay in the effect of rising rents. For George, rents were payment, not for the use of land in the usual sense, but for pure access to specific places and locations. But why should some people have the right to limit others' access to the use of the earth? Surely it belongs to us all. Worse, the limiting of access by demanding payment would undermine the benefits of innovation and hard work. To prevent this linking of progress and poverty, George said a major policy shift in taxation was required. This is well known among economists as the Georgist single tax on rents, or the Henry George theorem. Since George's time, there has been progress both in the economy itself and in economic analysis. The economy has been growing, and growth models have become highly sophisticated, in many cases focusing on matters that were central to George a century earlier. But that progress has also led to poverty, obvious in the economy itself. Our mainstream economics is also poverty-ridden, stricken. Our analytical models do not explain the persistence of poverty very well, nor do they account for crises and crashes, let alone the recent and stubborn growth of inequality. The mainstream theory of income distribution, marginal productivity, which assumes diminishing returns for all these factors of production and the markets will coordinate their adjustment. Distribution is hopelessly flawed. George rightly rejected an early version of it. And contemporary economic theory has almost completely lost sight of rents and real estate, even though real estate was center stage in the global financial crisis of 2008. a crisis directly resulting from speculation in the housing market. And in 2016, Donald Trump, a real estate developer whose rise to power is intimately linked to rents and real estate speculation, was elected president. With a solid Republican majority in Congress, he began to implement a set of relentlessly regressive trickle-down economic policies that can be expected to lead to more poverty among vast segments of the population. Andrew and I wanted to find insights and tools in George's thought to counter this trend, to support progress and alleviate poverty. Before Andrew died, we had settled on 5 main points in George's writing that we wanted particularly to explore. 1, George emphasized cooperation as well as competition in regard to increasing productivity. He saw that the division of labor and cooperation as settlements developed on new land created value in location and generated increases in output while bringing about innovation. This is what generated the differentials on which rent is based, as we will explain. Number 2, George and his followers claimed that the total value of land in a region would tend to equal the value of the aggregate output of that region. 3, further, they claimed that total rents would tend to equal the costs of government, so that taxing rents would pay for government. And number 4, they contended that unless prevented by an activist government, inequality in wealth and income, roughly between the upper and lower classes, but also between other significant groups, would tend to rise inexorably. And number 5, and finally, George repeatedly attacked land speculation and its tendency to withdraw land from productive use and to promote concentration, a point that seemed to both Andrew and myself to have a direct bearing on today's world. Only today it's not land alone, but finance generally that is subject to speculative excesses. I wrote up notes on theory while Andrew worked on rents, cost of government, land values, and GNP. I eventually put our notes together into 2 more or less finished articles to present at the annual conference of the Eastern Economics Association in New York City. Economists have given George short shrift, which is a shameful oversight. He has much to teach us. He was uniquely American, perhaps our greatest economist, certainly our most original. He is justly famous and heralded in the 19th century, and his book Progress and Poverty, which is the source for much of our analysis on these pages, was the best-selling book on economics of that entire century. The book Progress and Poverty in Economics by Edward Nell.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So Donald Trump has a plan to woo white middle-class suburban women. I'll tell you about that in just a minute. But first, Greg Palast, the investigative journalist, and the author of How Trump Stole 2020. His most recent book is on the line with us, gregpalast.com, of course, the website and the Twitter handle, or Greg Palast, the underscore Palast, the Twitter handle, just like mine has underscore between Tom and Hartmann. Greg, welcome back. So you're having to sue Georgia again? Do I have this right?
Well, I'm hoping not. What if they did the right thing? As you know, about 6 weeks ago, the ACLU issued a report of mine that 198,351 voters, nearly 200 grand of voters, were wrongly, illegally removed from the voter rolls by a partisan hack named Brad Raffensperger. His name really is Perger. The guy who took Brian Kemp's place and continued Brian Kemp's bleaching of the voter rolls whiter than white. And we have said, look, you've got to take a look at this list that the ACLU released, and you've got to look at the evidence that these people are wrongly removed, put them back on so they can vote. Now, I have to say that in the state of Wisconsin, they took our information, our list, and they agreed with us that the voters shouldn't be purged. But in the state of Georgia, look, let's face it, the reason we all have Georgia on our mind is that it could change not only the White House but the Senate, and that's what the GOP is concerned with. It's now a white minority state. They don't stand a chance. The polls are showing Biden is neck and neck with Trump, but more important, two Democrats are winning the Senate races. That could flip the Senate. And they are panicked. So the only thing that they can do is stop voters from voting. So we are demanding that they look at this information. I don't care whether it's not up to me whether people vote Democratic or Republican. The issue is there's 198,000 voters out there who are going to be blocked from voting. That's 4 times the supposed Kemp victory margin of 2018. And this could literally determine the presidency and the Senate. We're very concerned. So we're saying, look, we beat you in court once. By the way, you remember the Palace Investigative Fund, I sued Brian Kemp when he was Secretary of State and his current successor, and the federal courts said, you guys are lying, basically, to the court. You better open up your files to Mr. Palace. He even had to pay our lawyers. So I was saying, look, do I really have to sue you again? Of course, they want me to sue because they know that they can kite that past the election. I'm asking, I don't know what to do except to say call on this GOP hack in Georgia to try to remember that he's an American and put these Americans back on the voter rolls.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. Broadly speaking, as you're looking out at the country here, with your investigative reporter hat on and having been the guy who broke back in 2000, the story of how the only reason that George W. Bush even got within spitting distance of Al Gore was because his brother took George W. Bush's felon list from Texas, applied it to the voter list in Florida, where his brother Jeb was the governor, and purged, what was it, 90,000 African Americans to the voting rolls?
94,000 people were purged, mostly African Americans. That was the election. 88% were Democratic voters, and that's how we ended up with George W. as president. We are hoping that we don't have a Jim Crow election again, but it's looking bad.
So are you seeing this happening in other states beyond Georgia?
Other states, yes. There's many states where we've had these ugly purges. From the Carolinas, we've had about 30 states conducting purges. The most severe is Ohio. Nearly 1 million voters wiped off the voter rolls by the GOP hackster who's the Secretary of State there. Very serious stuff. And then we also have the problem that in states where even the Democrats have taken over, like North Carolina and Michigan, where unlike Wisconsin or other states, they're not putting back the people that were removed by the GOP. So I'm very, very concerned that we're going to have literally millions of people. Remember, according to Brennan Center and the federal government, 16.7 million people have been removed from the voter rolls, purged, wiped out in the last 2 years. There's going to be a lot of people showing up surprised that they're not allowed to vote. I do want to remind people, bring ID, bring proof of address, because if you've been wiped off the voter rolls, you don't know it. You show up in several states like Michigan and Wisconsin, you can register on Election Day, but you're going to have all kinds of paperwork with you. Bring it. It could be you.
Right. Bring your Social Security card, bring your birth certificate, bring your utility bills, bring your driver's license, bring your passport, bring everything you possibly can. Let me just remind people.
With an official picture on it. Yeah, a photo ID in some states.
Yeah. Let me just remind people that in the 2016 election, the exit polls showed Hillary Clinton won Florida 47 to 46%, that she won North Carolina 48 to 46%, that she won Pennsylvania 50 to 46%. These are the exit polls. And she won Wisconsin 48 to 44%. But in each one of those 4 states, because those people who gave her the margin of victory were almost certainly voting provisional ballots because they had been purged from those states' voter rolls by Republican secretaries of state, when they walked out of the voting place, they told the exit pollster, yes, I voted for Hillary Clinton, but the state never counted their ballots because there wasn't a lawsuit in those states that forced them to, and red states generally don't count provisional ballots. And so instead, So we saw, the bottom line is we saw a 2.5-point gain for Trump in Florida. We saw a 5.9% gain for Trump in North Carolina. We saw a 5.6% red shift for Trump in Pennsylvania. And we saw a 5.1% red shift for Trump in Wisconsin. We're looking at polls right now that are within 2, 3, 4%. In these states where you've got over 5% red shift caused by people being thrown off the voting rolls, and that was 2016. It sounds to me like they're getting even more aggressive now, Greg. Or is this, are they less aggressive?
No, it's more aggressive. It's nasty. It's aggressive. I've been trying to bust them. Thank you to the ACLU. Thank you to Black Voters Mattered, warning people, trying to reverse this. Again, our only palpable success is Wisconsin. And by the way, when you say, understand, we have this nasty little secret America where we don't count all the votes. 925,000, nearly 1 million provisional ballots were cast in 2016 and then rejected, never counted, never tallied. Only 1 million, which is, by the way, more than 11 times Trump's supposed victory margin. So it's huge. Be very careful with your registration. Check your registration right now at vote.org or go to gregpalast.com. Check out the links. And in those states where you can re-register, do so. Where you have same-day registration, bring your ID. And again, and by the way, a lot of states don't tell you. Like I walk into a California voting station, there's no sign, no indication that you can actually register right there, right now. If they say that you're not registered, instead of taking a provisional ballot, say, "May I register today? I've got ID with me." So look, the trickery. They're desperate. The trickery is terrible. In places like Georgia, where it's not only the presidency but 2 Senate races, Michigan, where there's a tight Senate race, look out for the Jim Crow trickery. It's really bad this year. It's worse than ever.
And they're having to do this, because this is the only way they can win elections. The front page graphic on the New York Times website right now. In 1976, 71% of the voters were white college voters without college degrees. That's Trump's base. Today, that's 39%. In 76, 17% of the electorate was white voters with college degrees, who tend to be Democratic voters. Now it's 34%. And in 76, only 11% of the electorate was minority voters. Today, it's 27%. So, they're running against the demographic tide, and the only way they can do it is to suppress the vote. And Greg Palast, you are doing God's work out there telling people about it. They should get over to gregpalast.com and see the whole story. Greg, thanks for dropping by.
Tell God to bring his ID to vote. Bye.
There you go, Greg. Amen. And be sure to check out Greg's new book, How Trump Stole 2020. We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I will tell you about Donald Trump's secret plan to win the hearts of America's white suburban, he calls them housewives. And welcome back. Tim in Aloha, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
This whole nightmare, it's just an irrelevancy of what's going to happen tonight. Do you actually think that there's going to be somebody watching that debate and go, "Hey, honey, let's watch that," and then when it's over, we'll determine who we're going to vote for? That's
if past viewership is any indication of present viewership, probably 60 or 70 million Americans, as many as a third of American adults will be watching the debate tonight. And so, I think that it's possible that if one or the other of them really screws up badly, that it could alter the outcome. It's unlikely, but I think it's still possible.
Which is really a sad comment in itself, Tom. That's scary what you just said. You see what I mean? It shows a lack of people with any kind of knowledge.
Well, this is where I think that Trump and Biden have different goals tonight. As I've said earlier, I've been saying this for a week or so, and every bit of evidence that I've seen since I first started singing this song reinforces it. Joe Biden's running for president. He's going to be talking about the issues facing America and what he wants to do to help the American people, step by step. And put the oligarchs in a box and fix some of the problems with this country. Donald Trump is not running for president anymore. Donald Trump is running for his next reality show. He's trying to set it up, and the fact that NBC gave him that time last week tells me or suggests to me that Mark Burnett or some of the other folks who program, who produce very, very profitable programs for NBC, and some of the executives at NBC may be thinking the same way that ABC executive who was caught on tape back in 2016 saying, Donald is terrible for America, but keep it coming. You're
it's all
jacking
about
our profits up.
demographics and market share. That's basically what it amounts to, because that's what the media is all about. And what may happen tonight, if it gets to the point where he can't verbally abuse Biden, he's going to obviously use more hand motions and more facial expressions. And I wouldn't be surprised if it gets to a certain point where he feels like he'll go after Kristen Welker too. That's going to happen. And then he may actually walk out of there. And I wouldn't put it past that guy, because what that would do is shore up that lunatic base that he has. You can't overlook any.
That would be interesting. I mean, he did that with Leslie Stahl, but he waited until the last 5 minutes. He knew it was the end of the interviews, so that tells me that he didn't walk out because he didn't like the questions. They just released some of the transcripts, and the questions were not onerous. I think that he just wanted to grab the news cycle. Every day that he grabs a news cycle is a good day in his mind, because it means down the road he'll have more customers, he'll have more people he can sell things to, more people who might watch his new TV show or watch his new TV network, more spectacle. And so probably, Tim, I think you're brilliant. I think one of the best ways he might create spectacle tonight would be to walk out. Although if he does, he'll wait until the last 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, but what useful information is he going to impart to anybody? That never has happened, and it's not going to, because he's working on the emotionalism of what people are thinking as far as how they're going to vote and act. And a lot of it's regional variation.
On the other hand, though, Biden is going to be bringing actual policy answers to this thing. He's been talking
hopefully more people will wake up.
Yeah, I'm with you. Tim, thank you for the call. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Donald's got a plan to win back the women's. Right after this. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. In our special video over at TomHartmann.com for supporters of our program, the one today is for anybody who has any connection, or for this week, anybody who has any connection with the military or anybody in the military who might still think that Donald Trump is a good guy. And I'm going through, I don't know how many, 20, 30, 40, 50 individual data points of times when Trump has trashed our troops, when Trump has deported troops, when Trump has deported military spouses who aren't citizens, when Trump has lied to our troops, when Trump has, specifically pulled money from our troops. I mean, he took money out of military housing, which is in some parts of the country, mold infested and really in a crisis, to build his border wall that Mexico is supposed to pay for. As just one example. So there's a whole list of these things in that new video that's available over at TomHartmann.com, especially for anybody who has any consideration or concern at all for our U.S. military. Done, and I'd love to hear from the women in our audience if you think this is going to win over people, or if this is just an indicator that Donald Trump is developmentally stuck in 1955. He has suggested he's done this in several of his rallies, where he's talking about suburban housewives, and what he's talking about are working class white women in the suburbs. And they're turning on him. They're turning against him. And, we have some indication as to why. It might be the 20-plus women who have charged him with sexual assault or rape. It might be his paying off porn stars and Playboy bunnies for sex. It might be the way that he speaks to women. Every time a woman is asking him questions, he denigrates them, he trash talks them, he speaks to them like they're children. So he's got some problems here, but he has a strategy. He actually has a strategy, and this is how he played it just a couple of days ago in one of his rallies. He said this was a week ago Sunday. Or no, it was last Sunday. He says, the women come up to me. The women, they say don't like me. They actually do like me a lot. Why? Because I freed up their dishwashers to dispense more water. We freed it up. I'm quoting Trump verbatim from Sunday's rally. We freed it up. Now you can buy a dishwasher and the water comes out. It's beautiful. Go and buy a dishwasher. Those dishwasher companies, I said, what's wrong with this thing? It doesn't clean the dishes, right? And now we freed it up and you can buy a dishwasher and the water comes out. Honest to God. And then he's like, suburban women love me. You think it's going to work? It was all that evil regulation prevented you ladies in the suburbs from doing your wifely duties with your dishwashing machine. And Donald Trump solved that problem. Somehow I'm skeptical. I don't think this is going to work. But this is and this is Trump's Hail Mary. He's been talking this at several of his rallies now, and the women in the audience go nuts. They love it. Of course, they're maggots. I mean, they're his followers. They're these TrumpHumpers. So anyway, meanwhile, WJZ, a local, I'm going to sneeze here. Excuse me. The local, I'm not sure if it's a TV or radio station in Maryland, is reporting that James Dale Reed, 42, of Maryland, was arrested after writing a letter and leaving it at the home of somebody who had a Biden sign out front. Now, this is, we have this story about how Iran was sending letters to registered Democratic voters, particularly minority registered Democratic voters, saying, we are the Proud Boys and we are coming to get you if you don't vote for Donald Trump. We're going to get you. And somehow John Ratcliffe, the former, cokehead, Freedom Party, Freedom Works, Tea Party congressman, who is now the director of national intelligence, said yesterday, this is because the Iranians want Trump to lose. Therefore, they're sending out, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of emails, mostly to minority voters, saying that the Proud Boys are going to get them if they don't vote for Trump, which doesn't make any sense to me. But this is a homegrown terrorist. This guy wrote this letter. It says, this is a warning. If you are a Biden-Harris supporter, you will be targeted. We have a list of homes and addresses by your election signs. This is local terrorism. We're the ones with those scary guns. We are the ones your children have nightmares about. And the letter goes on to say that they were going to kidnap, beat, sodomize, and then murder both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on national television. I keep pointing out, you look at these ISIS guys in their big pickup trucks with their giant ISIS flags, these giant oversized flags, as they're driving around the desert in Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq with their giant flags, shooting their guns in the air and going, Yahoo! And then going home and, beating the women and their families and preventing them from going to school. And I'm like, what's the difference between these ISIS guys and these TrumpHumpers? The proud Nazis out there. What's the difference? It's, as far as I can tell, the only difference is one uses Islam as their excuse and the other uses Christianity as their excuse. Am I missing something here? But this is what's going on. And I mean, this is just, one guy who got caught. How many others are there out there who didn't? He's facing charges of voter intimidation and threatening mass violence. James Dale Reed of Maryland. And he's probably out on bond now. God only knows if he's writing another letter. And it's not just Donald Trump who brought us to this point. It's the right-wing billionaires who have been funding this crazy
You're listening to
stuff.
the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
They're funding these, message campaigns, direct message campaigns, open the schools, all this sort of stuff.
The Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from the Strip and Flip selection, as opposed to election, of 2016, 5 Jim Crows and Electronic Election Theft by Bob Fitrakis and Harvey Wasserman. This is from the chapter Part 1, page 15, Strip. The foundation of election theft is the manipulation of race as a divide and conquer strategy. It began with the first Jim Crow chattel slavery. Slavery in various forms has existed since the dawn of time, but in the colonies of British North America and then in the United States, it took on a uniquely virulent incarnation. Chattel slavery was, of course, a horrific, brutal labor system designed primarily in the American South to power a network of plantations that produced cotton, tobacco, indigo, rice, and other hot weather crops that could be grown in large fields. But it had a larger purpose here. Our peculiar institution, how the founders referred to slavery, was meant to divide black laborers from white in a caste system that would guarantee that they would never unite in rebellion. As we'll see, this originated with the infamous Bacon's Rebellion of 1675 in Virginia, in which indentured servants of both races joined forces. Plantation owners vowed to make sure that that never happened again. When the United States became an independent country, plantation owners also vowed to secure political benefits from their slaves. Thus, they wrote into the Constitution the 3/5 clause that gave slave owners additional representation for their slaves, even though those slaves could not vote. That additional vote count guaranteed that every president from Jefferson to Lincoln either owned slaves or his vice president did, and that the Congress was strongly controlled by slave owners right up to the outbreak of the Civil War. After the Civil War, with formal slavery abolished, a Jim Crow system of racial segregation overtook the South. Enforced by the Democratic Party and its Ku Klux Klan terror wing, white landowners updated the realities of slavery to again keep blacks and whites apart. The roots of racism since 1865 has been the treatment of legally freed African Americans as something less than human, guaranteeing all whites a sense of superiority and an economic leg up. When the populist and socialist movements that campaigned most powerfully from the 1880s to the 1920s worked to overcome this separation, they were hammered by the court and electoral systems through a series of stolen elections and twisted race-based legal decisions, and the fusion of the Democratic and Republican parties in the 1917 municipal races in the Northeast. Confirmed by the Supreme Court in the 1890s, this updated Jim Crow caste system again guaranteed that blacks in the South and parts of the North would not be allowed to vote, and that they would be carefully divided from whites by caste as well as class. Since 1970, the primary weapon for suppressing the minority vote has been the third Jim Crow, the drug war. In the tradition of Bacon's Rebellion and the populist socialist upheavals, blacks and whites once again began to unite during the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 1950s and 60s. In response, Richard Nixon's Republican Party invoked the divide and conquer war on drugs. Confronted with the liberalization of the Southern Democratic Party, Nixon feared that black votes might remake America's political map. In Republican eyes, there was only one solution: disenfranchise the African American population, along with young and Latino voters who were leaning strongly to the left. In 1972, Nixon pointedly ignored a powerful report from his own Blue Ribbon Schaefer Commission on drug use and escalated the attack on marijuana and other drugs. In the 45 years since, a staggering 41 million Americans have been arrested for pot or other controlled substances. That's a number of human beings that exceeds the populations of more than 150 other countries worldwide. It has left the United States with the largest prison population in the history of the modern world, while having little or no impact on the actual use of drugs. As Michelle Alexander has shown in her landmark book, The New Jim Crow, the majority of those incarcerated have been black and Latino, with a devastating impact on our elections. Millions of these mostly young, mostly male citizens have been stripped of their right to vote, as well as their ability to maintain families, obtain work, and meaningfully participate in the political lives of their communities. All this has been by design. Once again, a new Jim Crow policy has been delegated by a ruling elite to strip our non-white population of its ability to exercise its fair share of power in our electoral process and to unite with whites in political action. In the 1890s, rising industrial interests committed the nation to a fourth Jim Crow, a course of race-based global empire. The U.S. already had a history of foreign intervention, dating to Thomas Jefferson's 1803 use of our fledgling Navy to fight pirates along the coast, the shores of Tripoli, of what's now called Libya.
That was followed by the conquest of the North American continent with genocidal warfare used against the indigenous peoples who had lived here for 20,000 years. By the 1890s, when the frontier consumed, America's giant corporations began to expand overseas. They started with Hawaii, a constitutional monarchy, and then pushed into Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and beyond. And in all cases, these interventions involved the white-ruled U.S. interfering with the political systems of non-white countries. In discussing this fourth Jim Crow, we include an extensive, though not complete, list of these interventions. It underscores the reality that our own political system has become an imperial juggernaut, with the inevitable blowback bound to obliterate any residual pretense to real democracy at home. Generally, there's been an attempt to portray these interventions as benign, meant to bring democracy, progress, and the Christian faith to third world nations. In fact, they've been largely economic in purpose, a dollar democracy to grab other people's resources. The strip and flip selection of 2016 by Bob Petrakis and Harvey Wasserman. Daily rants and weekly op-eds at HartmannReport.com. It's free and there's no ads. HartmannReport.com. Hey, we have a new video up over at TomHartmann.com for folks who support our program. It's about a growing movement, oddly enough, on the hard right, on the far fringe extreme right, that says that because Congress, after the Civil War, had not seated senators and members of the House from the former Confederate states and refused to until they changed their state constitutions to eliminate slavery, because they did not have a say in the writing and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that ended slavery, gave equal protection under the law to everybody, and guaranteed the right to vote to formerly enslaved people, that because the Confederate states were not represented, these are illegitimate amendments. And oddly, one of the people who's at the forefront of this is Amy Coney Barrett. It's all over at TomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. By the way, just to follow up on what Greg Palast was talking about, the Supreme Court yesterday, Wednesday, overturned a lower court ruling that said that people, that Alabama could have drive-up voting. The Republicans in Alabama want to force people, including disabled people. The argument that was being made is that people with disabilities or people who are, I was going to say sick enough, but that's the wrong way to characterize it. People who are vulnerable to COVID, people who are older, people who are who have type 2 diabetes, people who have heart disease, people who have asthma, people who have the conditions that make it more likely that if they get the coronavirus at any age, they will die or be permanently injured. Those folks would rather not go in the building to vote. And so in Alabama, the Republicans are saying, and so, what the Alabama Secretary of State was planning to do was have somebody outside the voting place so that you could drive up and this person would hand you a clipboard with a ballot and you'd vote and hand it back and drive off, and they'd check your ID and do it just like if you'd walked inside, but you don't have to get out of your car. Sort of like, picking up your groceries at the store. Contactless. The Republicans sued and said, no, we can't have that. You've got to force people to get out of their cars and walk into the building, because we think that will scare people who are worried about the coronavirus, and those people, particularly older people who vote Social Security, Medicare, they're less likely to be willing to go into the building. So this is a way of suppressing the Democratic vote. It went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled 5-3. There's 8 members of the court right now. Ruled 5-3. The 5 conservatives said, to hell with the disabled people, to hell with people who are worried about COVID-19. We are all about putting Republicans in office. Keep in mind, 2 of those 5 people worked on the Bush v. Gore lawsuit in 2000 to steal the election away from Al Gore and give it to George W. Bush. And yes, it was stolen. Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts worked on that court, as did on that lawsuit, as did Amy Coney Barrett. There will soon be 3 of them. But all 5 Republicans said, to hell with these folks, we're going to make it hard to vote. And the 3 liberals all said, oh no, we should, drive-up voting should be no problem. Sonia Sotomayor wrote a very strong dissent. She wrote, the severity of the COVID-19 pandemic should by now need no elaboration. In other words, my 5 colleagues here are idiots. She went on to say, the Alabama Secretary of State, however, has prohibited counties from offering curbside voting, even for voters with disabilities for whom COVID-19 is disproportionately likely to be fatal. If those vulnerable voters wish to vote in person, they must wait inside for as long as it takes in a crowd of fellow voters whom Alabama does not require to wear face coverings. You get this? It's amazing. And I don't think you can bring your bear spray with you. So is Trump going to win women by saying, I got more water for your dishwasher? Leslie in Davenport, Iowa, what do you think?
Hi, how's it going? No, I don't think that he's going to win people over. And 2 things I think that are impacting women. I never supported him, but I've heard people who were neutral or, didn't like Hillary, who are women who are saying it's his complete failure of a response to coronavirus. I think mothers are really worried and anxious about their kids. They're not back in school. Their routines have been disrupted. Health has been threatened by COVID and his lack of response. So I think that's one reason women are not going to take Trump up on his offer to reelect him. And the other thing is moms are really upset about the separation of families at the border. I was part of a group that organized women moms 2 years ago and did a big march about returning children to their families. I think people are outraged, and moms especially, that these children have essentially been kidnapped from their families. So those are 2 reasons why I don't think suburban moms are going to come back to Trump.
Yeah, I think you're right, Leslie. I hope you're right. And yeah, now over 500 children, they've lost track of their parents. I mean, it's just, it ain't going to happen. They're probably never going to be reunited. And can you imagine the lifelong trauma that's going to cause for those children and for the parents?
It's an abomination.
I mean, I cannot imagine if somebody had torn one of my children from me when they were young, and I never saw them again. I would have spent the rest of my life mourning. It's just amazing. Leslie, thank you. Thanks for weighing in, and thanks for listening to SiriusXM. Appreciate it. Erica in Seattle. Hey, Erica, your thoughts?
Hey. I don't think he can say anything that would convince us to vote for him. He has nothing meaningful to say to us. His brain is stuck in the 1950s. He has no idea about the needs of the modern woman. He doesn't know what our concerns are: equal pay, free access to health care, access to birth control, the right to choose. I mean, he's archaic. I'm not voting for him. I didn't vote for him before. None of my friends voted for him, and they're not going to vote for him.
Yeah, I'm with you. And do you think that people should be able to use bear spray if a Trump humper gets close and starts yelling at them without a mask?
I'm sorry, if a bear spray on the Trump humper?
Right.
Yep.
Okay. I'm collecting votes here. Erica, thank you. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate the call. Thank you. Thank you. Carla in Brooklyn, New York. Am I saying your name right?
Yes, you are.
Great. Thank you. What's on your mind?
Yes. Well, I had one topic on my mind, but it does relate to Trump trying to appeal to women voters. The perspective I wanted to share was in regards to Trump attacking Hunter Biden. I mean, what mother would find that appealing, that you're attacking a vulnerable child, even though he's an adult? Speaking of adults, I don't see why the Democratic Party, we're following a rule book that nobody's following. It's the rhythm has changed, and we're dancing to the same beat. Biden, I don't see what the problem would be with him addressing what the Trump kids are doing. They're grifting, they're stealing, they're exploiting taxpayer resources, and it'll be very simple for Joe Biden to lay it out in just a couple of sentences. tally up all of the, the profits they've made and how they've made them. Tally up
but Carla,
the
if
expenses.
he basically says your kids are worse than my kids, isn't that acknowledging that he's got a problem with his kids? Tacitly.
If who says your kids, my kids?
If Biden goes after Ivanka and Don Jr. and Eric, the basic message is your kids are worse than my kids. And if Biden basically says that, isn't he ratifying the idea that it's okay to talk about our kids and that both our kids have a problem?
The kids thing, wasn't that really meant for, because traditionally with presidents, it would be their minor children that it really referenced. I mean, they're not kids, they're his accomplices and conspirators. I mean, those
That's true. Hunter Biden doesn't run the family business.
Exactly. And they're going after, it's like, 20 of them going after Joe Biden, Hunter Biden. They're all engaged in, nobody's divested. They're creating and influencing policy that's financially advantageous to them off of the American, the taxpayers dime.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. I don't see what the problem would be because, like I said, we're dancing to the same rhythm and it's a different beat. I think, if your political opponent has set out a blueprint that they want to engage in, then that's it. And I don't even think he should say, oh, your kids, my kids. Your family, look at what's going on. They're traveling overseas, they're staying at your businesses, traveling, doing business, overseas, foreign business overseas.
Have you noticed, Carla, forgive the interruption, we only have 15 seconds left. Have you noticed that Trump is starting to refer to the Biden crime family? It's like projection.
It's like so much projection, confession.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Okay.
Carla, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you, and I appreciate your weighing in. Good talking with you. Thank you. Good talking with you, and thanks again for listening to Sirius XM. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. What's going to happen tonight? And I'm going to be on Free Speech TV with Sonali afterwards, so I can't be drinking, unfortunately.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit TrumpHumpers.com for audio and video archives.
Or smoking. I mean, that's easier on your liver alternative. I can't do that either. It's legal here in Oregon, but I got to have a clear mind tonight. We'll see. And welcome back. Wow, it looks like every call that I have right now. Well, let's just pick up Richard in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Richard, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
One phrase. The difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is integrity.
Yeah. Well, did you see that some of these right-wing guys are circulating? I saw it on Twitter this morning, and I saw an article yesterday kind of trashing the practice. There's a photo of Joe Biden kissing his son on the cheek. And it's Bo. He's in his military fatigues, as I recall, probably having come back from Iraq. And Joe is literally kissing him on the cheek. And they're putting this photo out by way of saying, this is too weird. As if it's, I get it that it's a shout out to this weird, one of these weird conspiracy theories. It's about the children. But what's happening is a lot of people are looking at that picture going, wow, so the Republicans can't imagine a father kissing his son. And you see Trump with Bear on his son, has to walk 10 feet behind him and stuff like that. And I think it's actually hurting them, trying to trash Joe Biden for having an affectionate, for being affectionate with his own kids. I just, I don't understand it, Richard. I just don't understand this mentality that, macho men are they beat their children, but they don't kiss them. I don't get it. What am I missing?
I don't know, because my father always kissed me on the cheek, too.
Yeah, mine too. And sometimes on the top of the head when I was a little kid. I remember that. And, it meant a lot. It was good. Okay, Richard, thank you for the call. Diane in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Hey, Diane, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Thanks for having me on, Tom. And so, I'm responding to the suburban housewife thing. I mean, what is a housewife? You married to the house? But anyway, I don't even get that. But I'm going to reply to the lady that was saying, I know she means well, and she's saying Biden should call out Trump's kids. But that's exactly what Trump wants. If you start to equivocate Biden's kids with Trump kids, if he's already calling Biden the Biden crime family, it's not equal. And so if you start calling his kids out, then it's going to be, we're all crime family. And it's not true. Your family is a crime family, right? And so when he keeps talking about Hunter Biden and there's zero proof of that, everybody else in the whole world can see what his kids are doing. So Biden doesn't even have to say anything. It's obvious. We can see it. But when you start going after the kids, then it's starting to equivocate. Both families are crime families, and it's not true. Yeah,
it's a false equivalence. I absolutely agree with you, Diane. And I think probably the most that Biden should say is something like people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
Something like that. But you start calling out the kids, and then it's going where Trump wants it to go, right? Because then Trump has free for all. He's going to talk about Hunter Biden and all the stupid QAnon.
Well, I predict he's going to do that no matter what.
Yeah,
I could see Kristen Welker saying, Mr. Trump, what's your trade policy? And he'll go, Hunter Biden.
Right. But if Biden encourages it, then that gives them more free for all. That they have to stop and let him speak.
I agree.
If Biden engages,
I agree.
So, thank you, Tom.
I agree. And therefore, I doubt he will. Thank you, Diane.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court tells the story of Nixon and Reagan's committing treason to steal the White House. So Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor of Atlanta, is tweeting about how it took 8 days for a member of her family to get a COVID test back. And during that time, that person, who it turns out was positive, they didn't know for 8 days, that person infected 3 other people in their family. Had they simply known, they could have quarantined that person. Even Mick Mulvaney, right-wing crazy, former Tea Party congressman, acolyte of the Koch brothers. Even Mick Mulvaney is saying this is unacceptable during a pandemic when his own kids couldn't get tested, or one of his kids. The other one got tested and it took 7 days to get the results back. He says this is unacceptable. We've got a whole video about why this is, where the ideology that's driving. This is beyond incompetence. This is actually ideological. A new video out about this for the supporters of our program. You can find it over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. What a day, huh? What a day. Jesus in Jacksonville, Mississippi. Hey, Jesus, what's up?
Jacksonville, Florida, but that's okay. How's it going, Tom?
Oh, Florida. I'm sorry. What's up?
That's okay. Hey. So I'm calling to talk about the debate and follow up on what your other caller from New York, Colin, was saying about playing by different rules. And so I wanted to share 2 articles that I read that contradict each other. Basically, Rudy Giuliani shared with the Washington Examiner that he turned in a laptop to the FBI that had child pornography, which he said belonged to Hunter Biden. But his source for that laptop, that he got that laptop from, was John Paul Mac Isaac. And John Paul Mac Isaac had an interview with the Daily Beast, which they released on the internet on SoundCloud, where he said that one of the primary reasons why he would even look at that laptop is to make sure it doesn't have child pornography, which he said it didn't. And the FBI also looked at that laptop and found out that nothing was in it that was worth looking for. So then,
no, I've not heard porn being mentioned at all. What I've heard is that there are the supposed smoking gun emails are not actually emails on this computer. They're PDFs or GIF files, and they're just transparent forgeries. I mean, this thing is just pathetic. And the idea, and Jesus, thank you for the call. The idea that Hunter Biden is going to get on a plane from Los Angeles, where he lives, fly to Delaware, where there's this discount computer repair shop, and turn in a couple of computers and say, please fix these, and give his real name to a blind guy who can't say, well, yeah, I think it was Hunter, but I'm blind, a blind computer repairman. And then Biden flies back to California to wait for his computers. And then this blind guy says, oh, gee, look at this. I better call Rudy Giuliani. He knows about these things. Oh, God. I mean, it's just, it wouldn't even fly if it was pitched as a TV show. Joe in Gig Harbor, Washington. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you. I'm concerned about tonight's debate. Trump should be in quarantine. I believe he's still infected. And why is nobody bringing that out?
It appears that, solidly a week after you've recovered from this thing, you're actually not contagious. So I would be more concerned about the people with him. He's not coming alone. He's going to bring an entourage. And even the Secret Service agents. I mean, the White House is just a hotbed of coronavirus, but I get what you're saying, and it was a legitimate concern, I think, last time around. But this time, I still think it's a danger to Joe Biden to even show up because of the people that Trump will be bringing. Joe, thank you for the call. Herb in Middletown, Delaware. Hey, Herb, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I visited the sites of World War II cemeteries in Normandy. I cannot understand how any military person in their right mind, John McCain and the deceased in Normandy, it's astounding to me. But there are. This explanation, you have why.
I think, Herb, your phone is breaking up, but it sounded like you said you couldn't figure out how any military person could vote for Trump, given the way that he has disrespected our soldiers at Normandy and I would add, at Arlington as well. And that's where he said to John, what's his last name? The guy who was his chief of staff, John Kelly. That's where he said, they were standing at Kelly's son's grave, and he turns to Kelly and he said, "Why did he go? What's in it for him?" Like he can't understand the idea of service to country. And Kelly writes about this. I mean, he's the source of the story. He was right there. I'm with you, Herb. I don't understand how anybody with a military background can vote for this guy. It's just beyond the pale. Herb, thanks for the call, and thanks for listening to Sirius XM. Sandra in St. Paul. Sandra, we have a little less than a minute. You got a quick point?
Yes, quick point. You're talking about Trump trying to set up his not really running for presidency and setting up a plan for starting a network or a TV show or whatever. Mm-hmm. Isn't he going to be charged and sent to jail for all of his crimes?
Well, maybe. I mean, keep in mind, some of these rape allegations against Trump are 10 years old. And they're still in the courts. He's got 3,000 lawsuits against him from people he's refused to pay, including now the city of Tucson from 3 years ago when he had a rally there and he never paid the police for it. And he just ignores them or procrastinates. So I think he thinks that his lawyers and his appeals and dragging things out and countersuing and everything that he's done successfully for the last 40 years will work for him when he leaves the White House. And they may well. It may well, Sandra. So, I get what you're saying, but don't underestimate the power of somebody who's really rich and has a really good law firm to avoid prosecution. It's huge. Our courts are skewed toward rich white men. And so, there he is. Anyhow, we'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Get out and vote and encourage others. IWillVote.com. Tag you're in. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit TrumpHumpers.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabby.com. Gabby takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at Gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code Tom. CB Distillery for sleeping. More info at CBDistillery.com, code Tom. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Home Title Lock, protecting your most valuable asset. More info at HomeTitleLock.com, code radio. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more information, teethhealth.com, code Tom.